I am Clara, 33 years old, and the founder of a highly successful boutique urban redevelopment firm in Chicago. I thought hosting my parents and siblings for a lavish Thanksgiving dinner would finally bridge the gap between us. I spent $15,000 on a private Michelin-starred chef, curating an unforgettable evening. But as the clock struck 6, not a single one of them showed up. They abandoned me gathering elsewhere in secret while I sat alone in my $3 million penthouse, staring at an empty table in utter humiliation. Little did they know my grandfather would soon walk through my door with a single envelope that would completely destroy the cruel scheme they had planned for that very night. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to love you the most. The smell of roasted sage truffle butter and perfectly seared heritage turkey filled my penthouse. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking panoramic view of the Chicago skyline, the city lights reflecting brilliantly off the fresh layer of snow falling outside. Inside, everything was flawlessly arranged to exact specifications. The long mahogany dining table was set for 8 people, adorned with crystal glasses, custom folded linen napkins, and a beautiful autumnal centerpiece featuring dark red roses and gold accents. I had hired Chef Henri, a highly sought-after culinary genius, to handle the evening. He and his assistant had been in my pristine kitchen since noon, meticulously preparing a feast that was meant to be the ultimate olive branch to my family. At exactly 6 in the evening, Chef Henri wiped his hands on his spotless white apron and gave me a warm professional smile. He announced that the carving was complete, the side dishes were resting in warming trays, and the wine had been breathing for the perfect amount of time. I thanked him, keeping my voice bright and entirely steady so he would not suspect anything was amiss. I handed him an envelope containing his payment and a very generous holiday tip. He wished me a wonderful Thanksgiving with my family, gathered his expensive knives, and stepped into the private elevator. As the heavy steel doors of the elevator slid shut, the quiet of the penthouse settled heavily around me. It was not a peaceful silence. It was the kind of silence that rings in your ears and makes your chest tight. The digital clock on the double oven glowed bright red, reading 6:15, then 6:30, then nearly 7. The doorbell never rang. I walked slowly around the massive dining table, trailing my fingers over the backs of the empty velvet chairs. For a woman who negotiated multi-million-dollar real estate deals and navigated ruthless corporate boardrooms every single day, I felt completely paralyzed in my own home. My boutique urban redevelopment firm was built from the ground up by my own 2 hands. I took forgotten, dilapidated buildings in prime neighborhoods and transformed them into high-end luxury spaces. I was respected in my industry. I was wealthy, independent, and secure. But standing there looking at the untouched crystal and the steaming, magnificent food, all that success felt entirely hollow. This expensive, beautiful dinner was supposed to be a testament to my hard work, a way to share my blessings with my parents, Patricia and Richard, my older brother Connor, and my younger sister Audrey. Instead, this immaculate room had just become a monument to my absolute humiliation. I pulled my phone from the pocket of my silk trousers. The screen was completely blank. There were no texts saying they were running late in traffic. There were no calls asking for parking directions to my building. I dialed my mother, Patricia, first. The phone rang 3 times before being forwarded directly to voicemail. I kept my face carefully blank, hitting end and dialing my father, Richard. Voicemail again. A cold knot began to form in the pit of my stomach. I dialed my older brother, Connor. Straight to voicemail. Finally, I called my younger sister, Audrey. The line did not even ring before the automated voice kicked in. They were sending my calls to voicemail on purpose. They had organized a complete coordinated blackout. I did not collapse onto the floor. I did not shed a single tear. In my world, emotional breakdowns were a luxury you could not afford when people were trying to bankrupt you or push you out of a deal. I took a slow, deep breath, letting the rich scent of the roasted turkey and truffle gravy fill my lungs, and allowed a freezing, analytical anger to wash over me. My mind immediately traced this targeted cruelty back to its origin. It was not a random slight. It was a calculated punishment for a conversation that took place exactly 1 week ago. Audrey, the perpetual golden child of the family, had come to me demanding I co-sign a $500,000 business loan. She had pitched some vague, delusional idea for a luxury wellness app that had no business plan, no market research, and absolutely no revenue model. When I sat her down and calmly explained why backing a $500,000 loan for a phantom business was financial suicide, she threw a massive tantrum. She accused me of hoarding my wealth, of wanting to see her fail, and of being a bitter workaholic who cared more about spreadsheets than her own sister. My parents had immediately taken her side. Patricia had called me cold and unsupportive, lecturing me about how families are supposed to lift each other up. Richard had given me a stern speech about financial selfishness, completely ignoring the fact that I had built my redevelopment firm without a single penny of their money. After that argument, their communication had turned icy. But they never explicitly canceled Thanksgiving. They let me believe they were coming. They let me spend thousands of dollars in days of preparation, knowing all along they planned to leave me sitting at an empty table. I walked over to the nearest dining chair, pulling it out, and sitting down at the head of the table. I poured myself a generous glass of a very expensive vintage red wine. The crystal stemware felt heavy and cold in my hand. I took a sip, letting the rich flavor settle on my tongue. They wanted to break me. They wanted to remind me that no matter how many millions I made, no matter how many properties I acquired, I would always be the outsider in my own family if I refused to submit to their financial demands. I looked at the perfectly arranged plates, the polished silver, and the ambient lighting, reflecting off the snow-covered windows. The silence in the penthouse was no longer paralyzing. It was clarifying. I was 33 years old, successful, and completely self-made. I did not need to buy their presents with a lavish dinner, and I certainly did not need to purchase their love by funding Audrey's financial disasters. I took another sip of wine, my mind shifting gears from a disappointed daughter to a strategic executive. I knew my family well. They were not just sitting at home quietly ignoring me. They were people who fed on appearances and social validation. If they were ignoring me, they were doing it together somewhere else, celebrating my exclusion. I just needed to figure out where they were and what exactly they were hiding. Because with my family, an act of coordinated cruelty this large was never just about a rejected loan. It was always a smokescreen for something much worse. I step away from the dining table, the heavy silence of the penthouse pressing against my shoulders. The extravagant feast sits completely untouched, cooling under the warm glow of the custom chandeliers, a smokescreen for something much worse. I leave the dining room behind the sharp click of my heels on the Brazilian walnut floors, echoing through the cavernous space. My phone feels like a block of ice in my hand. I unlock the screen and tap my mother's contact name. The line does not even ring. It connects immediately to Patricia's automated voicemail greeting. I hang up. I tap my father's name. Richard's phone does the exact same thing. A seamless instant diversion to voicemail. I swipe down to my brother Connor. Voicemail. I press the contact for my younger sister Audrey. Voicemail. The pattern is absolute. This is not a collective accident. This is a synchronized communications blackout. They have all intentionally turned their phones off or blocked my number. I walk down the wide hallway, passing the floor-to-ceiling windows that showcase the glittering Chicago skyline, and step into my home office. The room is a stark contrast to the festive decorations in the living area. It is a space of pure, unadulterated focus. A massive drafting table dominates the center of the room, covered in sprawling architectural blueprints for my latest commercial redevelopment project in the West Loop. I run my hand over the crisp blue lines and structural elevations. These blueprints represent a $40 million revitalization effort. They represent my tangible, undeniable success. Seeing the blueprints triggers the memory instantly. The lingering scent of roasted sage from the kitchen fades, replaced by the bitter recollection of exactly what happened in this room last Thursday. Audrey had stormed into this office, her designer handbag slung over her shoulder, carrying a glossy, superficial presentation folder. She threw it directly onto my active blueprints, disrupting my workspace with her characteristic entitlement. It was a pitch deck for a luxury wellness app. She demanded that I co-sign a $500,000 business loan to secure her seed funding. She did not ask nicely. She demanded it as if my capital was her birthright. I remember standing exactly where I am standing now, flipping through her presentation. It was a complete joke. There was no user acquisition strategy. There was no sustainable revenue model. There was no market research beyond a few aesthetic mock-ups of how the app interface would look on a smartphone. Audrey had never managed a budget in her entire life. She had bounced from one funded hobby to another, always subsidized by our parents. When I asked her how she planned to monetize the user base to cover the exorbitant interest payments on a $500,000 loan, she stared at me blankly and told me I was missing the vision. I gave her a flat, absolute refusal. I told her I do not underwrite fantasies, and I certainly do not co-sign massive commercial loans for businesses that have zero path to profitability. The fallout was instantaneous and explosive. Audrey burst into tears, playing the victim with practiced perfection. Within an hour, my phone was ringing incessantly with hostile calls from Patricia and Richard. My mother accused me of being cold and sterile. She said my wealth had made me ruthless, and that families are supposed to lift each other up, regardless of the financial risk. My father lectured me on loyalty, insisting that my refusal to back Audrey was an act of extreme selfishness that embarrassed the family name. Connor chimed in with snide text messages accusing me of hoarding my success and looking down on the rest of them. They unleashed a coordinated campaign of emotional blackmail, trying to batter down my professional boundaries with intense guilt. I held my ground. I told them if the wellness app was such a brilliant investment, they should mortgage their own assets to fund it. Now, staring at the empty office, the realization hits me with crystalline clarity. This abandoned Thanksgiving dinner is their direct response. This is their coordinated punishment. They allowed me to spend $15,000 on a private chef. They allowed me to spend days anticipating a family reunion. They let me set the table, pour the wine, and wait in silence, all to maximize my humiliation. They want me to feel the crushing weight of their absence. They designed this isolation to make me feel so lonely, so desperate for their affection, that I would break down, apologize, and sign the loan documents just to buy my way back into their good graces. A normal person might shatter under the weight of this psychological strike. A normal daughter might collapse onto the floor, cry until her eyes were swollen, and beg for forgiveness. I do not shed a single tear. I do not cry over bad investments, and right now my family is proving to be the most toxic investment of my life. The residual warmth of familial hope completely evaporates from my chest, leaving behind a chilling, analytical anger. The betrayal settles over me like armor, cold and impenetrable. I view the situation not through the lens of a heartbroken daughter, but through the eyes of a chief executive evaluating a hostile entity. They thought they could manipulate me by withdrawing their presence. They thought my desire for a family connection was a weakness they could easily exploit for $500,000. They made a catastrophic miscalculation. By executing this organized ghosting, they did not break my spirit. They simply severed the last remaining emotional tether I had to them. My jaw sets into a hard line. I look back toward the doorway, toward the dining room, where the expensive, untouched food sits on the table. The game has entirely changed. If they want to treat our relationship like a ruthless corporate transaction, I am more than willing to oblige. I am done playing the accommodating daughter, trying to win their approval. A cold, calculating energy surges through my veins. The silence of the penthouse is no longer a punishment. It is a battleground, and I am preparing for war. I stand in my office for a moment longer before walking back into the dining room. The digital clock on the oven shifts to 6:30. At that exact moment, the screen of my phone resting face down on the mahogany table lights up. A sharp chime pierces the heavy silence of the penthouse. It is an Instagram notification. Nia has just started a live video broadcast. Nia is 33 years old, a stunningly beautiful African-American woman, and a prominent lifestyle influencer. She married my older brother Connor 5 years ago, and since then, she has dedicated every waking moment to curating a flawless, aspirational aesthetic online. She monetizes her existence, turning every vacation, every outfit, and every family gathering into a sponsored brand opportunity or a viral moment. Her followers worship her projected lifestyle of effortless wealth and perfect familial harmony. I reach across the table and pick up the phone. I tap the glowing notification. The screen instantly fills with blinding warm light and the overlapping joyful chatter of a massive gathering. I watch the screen in absolute cold disbelief. They are not at a local restaurant. They are not at my parents' familiar colonial house in the suburbs. The video pans across a sprawling, unfamiliar suburban estate. The architecture is staggering in its scale and opulence. I see double-height ceilings adorned with intricate custom crown molding. I see a sweeping grand staircase lined with forged iron railings. I see imported Italian marble floors gleaming under the light of massive crystal chandeliers. My eyes track the figures moving through the frame. The entire family is there. My mother, Patricia, stands near a towering stone fireplace wearing a tailored silk dress, laughing loudly while holding a crystal flute of champagne. My father, Richard, stands beside her, looking relaxed and triumphant, holding a glass of aged scotch. Audrey is draped over a velvet sofa in the background, posing perfectly for the camera, showing absolutely no signs of the devastated, rejected entrepreneur she played just a week ago. Connor stands right next to Nia, wearing a smug, self-satisfied smirk, looking like a man who has just conquered the world. The children are running joyfully around a massive double-wide kitchen island, covered in a Thanksgiving feast that easily rivals the one sitting cold on my table. Nia flips the camera to face herself. Her makeup is immaculate, her long braids styled to perfection, catching the warm light of the chandeliers. She smiles brilliantly into the camera lens, delivering a practiced camera-ready beam designed to convey absolute happiness and superiority. The most perfect Thanksgiving at our family's new estate. Nia announces, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness, projecting over the loud, cheerful noise of the room. She brings her champagne flute into the frame and clinks it against Connor's glass. Surrounding ourselves only with positive energy today. Hashtag family first. Hashtag blessed. The broadcast continues, showing Patricia raising her glass to the camera and blowing a kiss to Nia's followers. Richard claps Connor on the back. The sheer volume of their laughter, the clinking of expensive crystal, and the warmth radiating from the screen stand in violent contrast to the freezing silence of my penthouse. I stare at the frozen image of my family toasting to their perfection. The words Nia chose echo in my mind. Positive energy. That specific phrasing is not an accident. It is a calculated public strike. It is a direct continuation of Patricia's accusation from last week, a deliberate labeling of my financial boundaries as toxic. They are broadcasting to thousands of strangers, and specifically to me, that excising me from their lives has brought them nothing but joy and unimaginable wealth. I check the timestamp on the live video, 6:30 in the evening. The realization hits me with the force of a physical blow. They deliberately timed this post. They waited until the precise minute they knew my private chef would be gone. They waited until the exact moment I would be sitting down at my empty table entirely alone, waiting for guests who were never going to arrive. They orchestrated this digital slap to maximize the psychological damage. They wanted me to watch them celebrate in a multi-million-dollar mansion while my own $15,000 dinner went cold. My analytical mind, honed by years of cutthroat real estate deals, immediately takes over the emotional shock. I mute the video and watch the panning shots of the house again. I am not just a rejected daughter. I am a commercial real estate developer. I evaluate properties for a living. I know exactly what this kind of real estate costs. I scrutinize the background details of Nia's video. The custom wainscoting, the specific grade of the calicotta marble in the kitchen, the sheer square footage of the great room visible in the wide shots. This is not a rental property. This is a newly constructed or recently gutted luxury estate. A house of this magnitude in any of the desirable northern suburbs of Chicago lists for a minimum of $4 million. The math simply does not add up. Connor is a mid-level regional manager at a logistics firm. He is drowning in credit card debt, just trying to keep up with Nia's high-maintenance influencer lifestyle. Nia's brand sponsorships generate a decent income, but nowhere near enough to secure a mortgage for a $4 million mega mansion. Audrey is unemployed and was just begging for $500,000. My parents, Patricia and Richard, have a comfortable net worth on paper, but their assets are locked tightly in conservative index funds and their primary residence. They absolutely do not have $4 million in liquid cash to drop on a secret family estate. If they did not have the capital, how are they standing inside that house? How are they hosting a massive gala and calling it their family's new estate? I watched the video loop once more. Nia is spinning around, showing off the cavernous foyer. "We are so incredibly blessed to start this new chapter in our dream home," she says to her followers. "Building generational wealth and keeping the family circle tight." Generational wealth. The phrase catches in my mind, triggering a sudden sharp alarm. There is only one person in our entire bloodline who possesses actual generational wealth: my grandfather, Harrison. He holds an irrevocable trust worth tens of millions of dollars amassed from decades of brilliant and ruthless commercial property investments. But Harrison is notoriously frugal and highly protective of his trust. He despises frivolous spending. He would never authorize a $4 million withdrawal for Connor and Nia to play pretend on Instagram. He certainly would never fund a massive estate purchase without consulting me, his designated alternate power of attorney, and the only family member who shares his business acumen. I pause the video again, searching the background of the live stream. I look at the faces in the crowd. I scan the people mingling near the fireplace. I check the groups chatting by the kitchen island. I look for the familiar, imposing figure of my grandfather. Harrison is not in the video. My chest tightens. The entire family is celebrating a massive financial acquisition, chanting about generational wealth, and the patriarch who controls that wealth is completely absent from the footage. This coordinated exclusion is not merely a petty punishment for a rejected business loan. It is a victory party. They have acquired something massive, something life-changing, and they deliberately cut me out of the picture to revel in it, without my sharp analytical eyes questioning the math. They wanted me isolated and distracted by my own hurt feelings. I set the phone back down on the table. The cold, analytical anger hardens into something much more dangerous. They are hiding a massive financial anomaly, and they think I am too busy nursing my wounds to notice. They have made a fatal error. I do not retreat when challenged. I investigate. I leave the dining room behind and walk straight into my home office. The glow of the city lights outside casts long shadows across my drafting table, but I ignore the view. I sit down at my primary workstation, a sleek curved desk equipped with 3 high-definition monitors. I am no longer operating as a sister or a daughter. I am operating as the chief executive of a commercial redevelopment firm. I plug my phone into the workstation and cast Nia's saved live stream directly onto the largest central screen. I maximize the window. Every pixel is blown up, revealing the absolute truth hiding behind their digital celebration. I play the video again, this time muting the obnoxious overlapping laughter and the loud bass of the background music. I do not want distractions. I need to dissect this facade frame by frame. I press pause just as Nia spins the camera to capture the grand foyer. My eyes scan the architectural elements with professional ruthlessness. This is not a spec house built by a volume developer. This is custom high-end construction. I note the intricate details of the extravagant crown molding. It is multi-layered, likely milled from solid mahogany, a feature that easily adds tens of thousands of dollars to a renovation budget. I look closely at the flooring. It is not standard ceramic tile. It is seamless, large-format imported marble, laid perfectly without visible grout lines. I shift my gaze to the kitchen area visible in the background. The countertops are massive slabs of genuine Calicotta gold marble featuring thick waterfall edges that sweep down to the floor. The custom cabinetry extends all the way to the 12-foot ceilings. I estimate the sheer scale of the property based on the depth of field in the video. The great room alone spans at least 1,000 square feet. A house with these proportions built with these specific ultra-luxury materials carries an astronomical carrying cost. I mentally calculate the property taxes, the heating and cooling utility bills, the landscaping, and the premium home insurance required for an estate of this magnitude. This is a property that bleeds cash every single month just to maintain its basic existence. The disconnect between the physical reality of this estate and the financial reality of my family is glaring. It is a mathematical impossibility. I pull up a blank spreadsheet on my second monitor. I start plugging in the hard numbers I know to be true. Connor is a mid-level regional manager at a logistics firm. His base salary is public knowledge within his industry, capped at perhaps $150,000 a year. Nia is a lifestyle influencer. While she projects immense wealth, I know the influencer economy intimately from my firm's marketing division. Her brand deals provide a fluctuating, unreliable income stream, most of which she immediately reinvests into designer clothes and luxury vacations to maintain her online aesthetic. I type their estimated combined gross income into a cell. Then I calculate the debt-to-income ratio required to secure a jumbo mortgage for a $4 million estate. No underwriter in the country would approve them. They would need a minimum down payment of $800,000 in liquid cash just to sit at the closing table, plus verifiable reserves. Connor and Nia do not have $800,000. They have leased luxury cars and maxed out premium credit cards. My parents are equally incapable of funding this. Richard and Patricia have always prioritized looking wealthy over actually being wealthy. Their net worth is tied up in their colonial home and a conservative retirement portfolio. They cannot liquidate $4 million without triggering massive capital gains taxes and alerting their financial advisors to a catastrophic depletion of their assets. Audrey is entirely out of the equation, having just begged me for seed money to launch a non-existent wellness app. The math simply does not work. Unless they acquired an enormous undocumented infusion of untraceable cash, this house is a financial mirage. I hit play on the video again, letting it run forward in silence. The camera pans past the towering stone fireplace. I freeze the frame. My eyes lock onto the people standing in the background. There is Audrey. She is holding a crystal glass leaning against the marble counter. She is wearing a smug, utterly satisfied smirk. It is not the smile of a woman enjoying a holiday meal. It is the predatory grin of someone who believes she has just won a war. Beside her, Patricia raises her glass in a toast, her posture radiating arrogant triumph. The realization washes over me cold and absolute. This was not a spontaneous change of plans. This was a highly calculated, incredibly expensive flex designed specifically to exclude and demean me. They did not just buy a house or rent an estate for the weekend. They constructed a theatrical stage. They wanted to prove that they could access the highest echelons of luxury without my help, without my money, and without my presence. They wanted to broadcast to the world that they were thriving, ascending to a new level of social elite while leaving the difficult, demanding boundary-setting daughter behind. Audrey's smirk and Patricia's raised glass are directed at me just as surely as if they had tagged my name in the video. They are weaponizing this real estate to inflict maximum psychological damage. They want me sitting in my penthouse looking at my cold $15,000 dinner, feeling inadequate and easily replaced. But they have made a critical error in their performance. They built their stage using materials I understand better than anyone else. They are trying to use real estate to intimidate a commercial real estate developer. I open my third monitor and log directly into the multiple listing service database and the county property tax assessor portal. I bypass the consumer-facing real estate websites and dive straight into the raw, unfiltered data. I set my search parameters for the northern luxury suburbs: Lake Forest, Winnetka, Glencoe, Kenilworth. I filter for properties sold or leased within the last 90 days. I set the price floor at $3 million. Dozens of listings populate the screen. I work systematically, clicking through the gallery of each recently closed estate. I am looking for the specific architectural fingerprint from Nia's video. The custom wrought iron railing on the sweeping staircase. The distinctive arched window above the front entry. The specific grain of the calicotta marble on the massive kitchen island. It takes me exactly 14 minutes to find the match. A sprawling 6-bedroom, 9-bathroom estate located in the most exclusive, heavily guarded neighborhood in Lake Forest. The listing photos perfectly align with every frame of Nia's broadcast. I pull up the transaction history. The property closed just over 3 weeks ago. It was not a lease. It was a purchase. I check the final sale price. $4.2 million. I check the financing details. There is no mortgage recorded on the deed. No bank lien. No traditional lending institution involved. It was a cash transaction. $4.2 million in liquid cash wired directly to the title company. I lean back in my ergonomic leather chair, the glow of the 3 monitors reflecting in my eyes. The facade is entirely stripped away. The psychological warfare my family attempted to wage against me is secondary now. The emotional hurt of being abandoned on Thanksgiving is buried under a mountain of hard, undeniable financial data. Connor, Nia, Audrey, Richard, and Patricia did not pool their savings. They did not win the lottery. They found a way to access a massive, untraceable vault of liquid capital. They executed a multi-million-dollar cash transaction in total secrecy, and they used this holiday to flaunt their stolen victory right in my face. They wanted me to look at their perfect celebration. They wanted me to feel small. Instead, they just handed me the exact coordinates of their crime scene. I know where they are. I know what the property is worth, and I am about to find out exactly whose money they spent to buy it. I do not hesitate. My fingers trace the cool glass of my phone screen as I pull up my contact list and press my mother's name. Earlier tonight, my calls were met with the immediate hollow click of an automated voicemail diversion. They had formed a united front of silence to maximize my anxiety and enforce my isolation. But the dynamics have shifted drastically in the last 45 minutes. Patricia has been drinking vintage champagne. She is surrounded by a massive crowd of adoring guests in a $4 million estate. She is currently basking in the warm glow of a perceived victory. Arrogance breeds carelessness, and alcohol dissolves discipline. I know with absolute certainty that she will answer. The phone rings once, twice. On the third ring, the line connects. The background noise is an immediate chaotic symphony of newly acquired wealth. I hear the high-pitched clinking of crystal flutes, the loud baritone of Connor laughing at his own joke, and the thumping bass of a sophisticated sound system playing upbeat holiday jazz. "Well, look who finally decided to call," Patricia answers. Her voice is overly loud, slurring just slightly at the edges. It drips with an artificial syrupy sweetness designed to mask her underlying venom. "I am honestly surprised to hear from you, Clara. We all figured you were too busy hunched over a spreadsheet in your cold little office to remember it is a holiday. I do not rise to the bait. I do not raise my voice or offer the frantic, tearful greeting of an abandoned daughter. I speak with the chilling, measured cadence of a corporate interrogator conducting an internal audit. I prepared a $15,000 Thanksgiving dinner for this family mother. I state my words, slicing cleanly through the background noise of her party. You allowed me to curate a menu, hire a private chef, and set the table. You confirmed your attendance. Then you organized a complete communications blackout. I want a direct explanation for why you chose to orchestrate this exclusion." Patricia lets out a dramatic, breathy sigh. It is the exact sound she uses when she is preparing to flip a narrative and play the victim. I can picture her perfectly rolling her eyes for the benefit of whoever is standing nearby, shaking her head at my supposed unreasonableness. "Oh, Clara, please do not start with the dramatic victim routine." Patricia scolds, her tone dripping with patronizing condescension. "Nobody orchestrated anything against you. We simply made a last-minute executive decision for the good of the family. Your penthouse is just too sterile for the children. It feels like a clinical museum up there, It is absolutely not suitable for a warm traditional holiday gathering. She pauses to take a sip of her drink. I can hear the ice clinking against the glass. Besides, she continues, her voice hardening into something much more vicious. After your incredibly selfish behavior toward your sister last week, the family decided we simply did not want your toxic workaholic energy ruining our Thanksgiving. Audrey has been incredibly fragile since you crushed her dreams. We needed to protect her from your constant judgment and negativity. I stand perfectly still in my home office. The glow of the monitors reflects in my eyes, illuminating the property tax records of the estate she is currently standing inside. Her strategy is textbook gaslighting. She is attempting to reframe a targeted malicious boycott as an act of familial self-preservation. She expects me to defend my penthouse, to apologize for hurting Audrey, to beg for a second chance to prove my warmth. She expects the emotional reaction of a neglected child desperate for maternal validation. I deliver the calculated response of a chief executive officer, protecting Audrey's dreams. I repeat, letting the phrase hang in the air like a bad joke. Mother Audrey demanded that I personally guarantee a $500,000 commercial loan for a wellness app that does not exist. She brought me a presentation folder containing nothing but stolen internet aesthetics and hollow buzzwords. She has no coding experience, no market research, zero user acquisition strategy, and absolutely no path to profitability. You are missing the vision, Patricia snaps, parroting Audrey's exact defensive language from last week. You have all that money, Clara. You have limitless resources, but you refuse to share your blessings. You are completely morally bankrupt. I am financially literate. I correct her, my voice dropping to a lethal, icy register. Refusing to fund a delusional business venture is not toxic. It is basic financial literacy. Audrey is 30 years old. She has never held a job for more than 6 consecutive months. She treats entrepreneurship like a luxury hobby, fully expecting someone else to underwrite the inevitable failure. Backing her delusions would not be an act of sisterly love. It would be an act of financial suicide. Patricia gasps indignantly. I can hear her shifting her weight, her heels clicking against the imported marble floors I have just been analyzing on my screens. She is losing her grip on the conversation. The champagne-fueled confidence is fracturing because I am not playing my assigned role in her psychological game. You are incredibly arrogant, Clara, she hisses, dropping the sweet facade entirely. You think because you build fancy high-rises, you are suddenly better than the people who raised you. You look down on us. You sit in your ivory tower and judge this family, but you know absolutely nothing about loyalty. In this family, we support each other. We are building a legacy, something far bigger than your selfish little redevelopment firm. Her choice of words is fascinating. Building a legacy. It aligns perfectly with Nia's social media broadcast about generational wealth. They are actively utilizing corporate terminology to justify whatever massive financial transaction they have just executed. A legacy, I say, testing the word on my tongue. I lean forward, resting my fingertips on the edge of my desk. That is a very big word, Mother. Just like the $4.2 million estate you are currently standing inside is a very big house. Tell me, how exactly does a family that relies on my charity to fund a startup suddenly secure a multi-million-dollar cash transaction in Lake Forest? The music in the background of her party seems to vanish. The silence on the other end of the line is absolute and terrifying. There is a sharp, frantic intake of breath. Patricia's manufactured outrage evaporates, replaced instantly by raw, unfiltered panic. She did not expect me to know. She thought the digital blackout would keep me blind and isolated. I have no idea what you are talking about, Patricia stammers. Her voice drops to a frantic whisper. She is clearly walking rapidly away from the crowd, trying to find a quiet room. The clinking glasses fade into the distance. You are acting crazy, Clara. You are making up wild stories because you are upset about dinner. Legacy Heritage Holdings, LLC. I read the name off my third monitor, pronouncing every single syllable with devastating clarity. A shell company. A cash closing completed exactly 3 weeks ago. You are standing inside a corporate veil, Mother. Do not insult my intelligence by playing dumb. You coordinated this Thanksgiving blackout to punish me, yes. But mostly, you orchestrated it to distract me. You wanted me locked in this penthouse drowning in self-pity, so I would not look at the county tax records. You wanted me blind to whatever massive financial fraud Richard is currently executing to fund this lifestyle. I hear a sudden scuffle over the speaker, a muffled curse, the sound of a phone being violently yanked away from an unsteady hand. Patricia is no longer on the line. The dynamic has shifted completely, and the real architect of this deception has just taken control of the narrative. Clara! A deep, gravelly voice barks through the speaker. It is my father, Richard. He does not sound frantic like Patricia. He sounds furious. This is the voice he uses when a subordinate questions his authority, a tone deliberately calibrated to shrink the listener into immediate submission. He has spent his entire life commanding rooms through sheer intimidation, expecting everyone in his orbit to bow to his patriarchal demands without a second thought. He uses volume and aggression as a shield to deflect scrutiny, but I am not one of his terrified employees, and I stopped shrinking for him a decade ago. Richard. I reply, intentionally stripping him of his parental title. The use of his first name is a calculated precision strike against his ego. I assume you are enjoying the new $4 million estate. Tell me, whose money did you use to close that cash transaction? He ignores the question entirely, defaulting to his signature tactic of aggressive redirection. You do not get to interrogate your mother, Clara. You do not get to call us and hurl baseless accusations just because you are sitting alone in your glass tower feeling sorry for yourself. You crossed a massive line today. You overstepped. I am looking at the county tax assessor portal right now. I state, my voice dropping to a low, lethal register. Legacy Heritage Holdings, LLC, a shell corporation set up exactly 30 days ago. I know exactly what you are hiding. The only piece of the puzzle I am currently missing is how you funded the purchase. But give me another 20 minutes and I will find that out too. Stop talking and listen to me. Richard snarls, his breathing heavy and distorted by the phone microphone. He is not used to being challenged with hard data. He is used to emotional capitulation, tears, and apologies. The fact that I am countering his anger with forensic accounting is driving him to the edge of a genuine breakdown. You think you are so incredibly smart? He continues, his words dripping with unadulterated venom. You think because you build fancy high-rises and manage massive budgets, you are suddenly superior to the people who put a roof over your head. You look down on us. You judge this family with your cold corporate mentality, but you know absolutely nothing about loyalty. You have no idea what it takes to protect a bloodline. I remain perfectly silent, refusing to interrupt his tirade. I let him expose his own desperation. His heavy breathing echoes in the quiet expanse of my home office. In this family, we sacrifice for each other, Clara. Richard dictates, delivering his ultimatum with the self-righteous fury of a man who fully believes his own manufactured reality. We protect our own. When Audrey came to you for help last week, you treated her like a hostile applicant. You humiliated her in front of us. You acted like your wealth makes you untouchable. Since you care more about your company's bottom line than your own sister's future, you have made your choice. You can spend the holidays with your bank statements. I do not flinch. I lean forward, resting my fingertips on the edge of my drafting table. You are deflecting, Richard. I press, refusing to let him control the flow of the conversation. You are trying to mask a massive financial liability behind a fabricated family dispute. Audrey's rejected loan is nothing but a convenient smokescreen. Where did you get the cash for that house Connor is drowning in consumer debt, trying to keep up with his wife's lifestyle? You and Patricia are tied up in conservative index funds. Did you leverage a shadow asset? Did you drain a corporate holding account? Whose money did you steal to buy that estate? Do not ever disrespect me like that again, Richard roars. The sudden explosive volume of his voice causes the speaker on my phone to crackle sharply. This family is moving forward to secure our legacy. We are building a fortress for the people who actually matter. We only welcome individuals who know how to be team players. You are entirely too arrogant for your own good, Clara. He pauses, catching his breath, trying to regain his position of absolute authority. When he speaks again, his tone is icy, a final decree meant to banish me into permanent exile. Do not try to find this house. Do not attempt to show up here and ruin this evening. You are officially uninvited from our lives until you learn how to respect your family and fall in line. With a sharp, definitive click, the line goes dead. I am left holding the phone in the absolute silence of my penthouse. The dial tone rings in my ear for a few seconds before the call automatically disconnects. I slowly lower the device and place it face down on my desk. The silence in the room is no longer heavy or oppressive, it is electric. I stand up, my posture perfectly straight, my breathing slow and controlled. I look out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the sprawling grid of Chicago below me, millions of lights piercing through the falling snow. Richard actually thought his aggressive posturing would intimidate me. He thought his booming voice and his threats of permanent banishment would send me spiraling into an emotional crisis. He believed his patriarchal authority was an impenetrable shield that could hide a multi-million-dollar financial anomaly. He could not be more wrong. The dial tone did not break my spirit. It severed the last fragile thread of familial obligation tying me to their toxic dynamic. I am no longer a daughter trying to navigate a complex relationship with difficult parents. I am a highly trained executive who has just been threatened by a hostile entity attempting to cover up a major fraud. My anger does not manifest as tears or thrown objects. It solidifies into a razor-sharp, hyper-focused weapon. I walk back into the dining room, moving past the cold $15,000 Thanksgiving feast without giving it a single glance. I do not care about the uneaten turkey or the melted truffle butter. I care about the paper trail. If Richard thinks he can execute a covert $4 million real estate transaction using a shell company and hide behind a Thanksgiving boycott, he is about to receive a devastating education in how ruthless I can truly be. I am already mentally drafting emails to my corporate legal team. I am preparing to initiate a full forensic audit of every single public record connected to Legacy Heritage Holdings, LLC. I am going to tear down their perfect social media facade, brick by brick, dollar by stolen dollar. They wanted a war. They just declared it. I turn back toward my office to begin compiling the digital dossiers. But before I can take another step, a sharp, unexpected sound shatters the quiet of the penthouse. It is the distinctive melodic chime of my private elevator. I freeze in the hallway. The private elevator requires a highly restricted, encrypted key fob to access my floor directly from the lobby. Only 2 people in the entire world possess that specific key fob. I have one. The chime rings again, followed by the heavy, mechanical hum of the reinforced steel doors sliding apart in the foyer. I step into the foyer, my muscles tensed, fully expecting my father or my brother to come marching out of the elevator. I brace myself for a physical confrontation, ready to order security to remove them from my building. I am prepared for Richard to bring his aggressive posturing directly to my doorstep, thinking he can intimidate me in my own home. The heavy steel doors slide apart with a soft mechanical hiss. But the figure standing inside the wood-paneled elevator car is not my father, nor is it my brother. The breath catches in my throat. I stare in absolute shock at the man leaning heavily against the brass handrail. It is my grandfather, Harrison. He is 78 years old, the formidable former commercial real estate tycoon, and the undisputed patriarch of our family. Harrison is a man who built an empire from nothing, navigating the cutthroat Chicago property market for decades with a legendary, ruthless intelligence. I have only ever known him to be impeccably dressed, standing tall, radiating absolute authority in tailored suits and cashmere overcoats. He is a man who commands respect simply by entering a room. Tonight he looks entirely different. He looks exhausted. He is covered in a thick layer of fresh snow. The shoulders of his dark wool overcoat are dusted white, and snowflakes cling to the brim of his classic fedora. He is leaning heavily, almost desperately, on his carved wooden cane. His breathing is shallow and labored, a visible cloud of vapor escaping his lips in the cold air of the elevator cab. The brutal Chicago winter storm raging outside has clearly taken a severe physical toll on him. His hands gripping the head of his cane are trembling slightly from the freezing temperature. Yet despite the physical exhaustion, his eyes are fierce. They are sharp, unyielding, and burning with a terrifying alertness. He is not a confused, wandering elderly man. He is a tactician who has just survived a hostile encounter. Grandfather. I gasp, the cold corporate armor I had just erected shattering instantly. I rush forward, crossing the threshold of the elevator to support him. I wrap my arm around his shoulders, feeling the freezing dampness of his coat, and gently guide him out into the warm, brightly lit foyer of my penthouse. He steps heavily, his cane thudding against the Brazilian walnut floor. "Get out of the cold!" I say, my voice thick with sudden, overwhelming concern. I help him shrug off the snow-covered overcoat, handing his hat and gloves to the side. His suit jacket underneath is immaculate, but his posture lacks its usual rigid perfection. I can feel the chill radiating off his skin. Chicago winters do not get any more forgiving with age. Harrison remarks, his voice raspy, sounding like grinding stones. He attempts a faint, tight-lipped smile, but the sheer physical exertion of his journey is impossible to hide. I usher him past the foyer and into the expansive living room, guiding him toward the plush leather sofa positioned directly in front of the modern gas fireplace. I grab a cashmere throw blanket from an armchair and drape it over his lap. "How did you get here?" I demand, my mind racing to process the logistics of his arrival. "The storm outside is blinding. The roads are terrible. Why are you not with them?" As the words leave my mouth, a horrifying realization crashes over me. The sheer, unadulterated cruelty of the situation crystallizes in my mind. I replay the footage of Nia's Instagram livestream in my head. I remember scanning the background of the massive $4 million estate, looking at the laughing faces, the clinking glasses, the roaring stone fireplace. I realize now who I did not see. I did not see Harrison. They did not just abandon me tonight, they abandoned him, my family. The people who constantly preach about loyalty and legacy deliberately left an elderly man to navigate a brutal winter storm on Thanksgiving night. But the horror goes much deeper than simple neglect. I know the truth about the Lake Forest estate. I know they purchased it using a shell company, and I know they could only fund that purchase by illegally siphoning money from Harrison's irrevocable trust. They did not just abandon him, they abandoned the very man whose wealth built their entire foundation. They used his money to buy a palace, threw a lavish party to celebrate their theft, and left the rightful owner of those funds out in the freezing snow. The utter depravity of their actions makes my blood run cold. It is a level of malice that borders on sociopathic. "I took a private car service," Harrison replies, his breathing beginning to steady as the warmth of the fireplace washes over him. "I paid the driver triple his usual holiday rate to navigate the blizzard. It was the only way to ensure I arrived here undetected." He does not sound like a victim. He sounds like a general describing a successful tactical retreat from enemy territory. I walk over to my custom wet bar and pour a generous measure of his favorite single malt scotch into a heavy crystal glass. I bring it back to him, handing it over carefully. He takes it with a nod of gratitude, his hands still shaking slightly, and takes a slow, deliberate sip. The amber liquid seems to bring some color back to his pale cheeks. "They thought they had me cornered," Harrison says, his voice gaining strength, the familiar commanding cadence returning. He looks past me, his sharp eyes surveying the penthouse, taking in the untouched $15,000 Thanksgiving feast, sitting cold on the dining table. He lets out a low, bitter scoff. "I see they executed their strategy against you as well. They wanted us both isolated. They wanted us separated." "I know about the house, grandfather," I state firmly, sitting down in the armchair directly across from him. I refuse to treat him like a fragile old man. I address him as my equal, my fellow executive. "I saw Nia's broadcast. I pulled the property tax records. I know they bought a $4.2 million estate in Lake Forest using a shell LLC. I know Richard and Connor do not have the liquidity for a cash transaction of that magnitude. They are touching your trust." Harrison looks at me, and for the first time tonight, a genuine predatory spark lights up his eyes. He is looking at the only person in his bloodline who actually inherited his ruthless intellect. He takes another sip of the scotch, leaning back into the leather sofa. You have always been fast, Clara, Harrison says, a grim satisfaction lacing his words. You follow the money. That is why you are the only one I could come to. But the house is merely a symptom of a much larger disease. You only see the smoke. I am here to show you the fire. He reaches into the inner pocket of his suit jacket. His movements are deliberate and careful. He pulls out a thick, heavily crumpled craft paper envelope. It looks out of place against his tailored suit, hastily stuffed and slightly damp from the snow. They did not just exclude you because of Audrey's business loan, Harrison says, tossing the envelope onto the marble coffee table between us. It lands with a heavy, definitive thud. And they did not just leave me in the snow because I am an inconvenience. He points a trembling but authoritative finger at the envelope. They isolated you tonight because they needed you out of the way. And they cornered me because they are executing a coup. Open it, Clara. Look at what your father is planning to do to me. I reach out and let my fingers graze the rough texture of the crumpled craft envelope. The thick paper feels heavy, burdened with the kind of secrets that destroy bloodlines. I slide my fingernail under the adhesive flap, breaking the seal with a sharp, tearing sound that echoes loudly over the crackle of the gas fireplace. Harrison watches me with an intensity that belies his physical exhaustion. The amber liquid in his crystal glass catches the light as he leans forward. He does not waste time on pleasantries or comforting platitudes. He looks directly into my eyes, ensuring I understand the absolute gravity of the situation. They didn't just exclude you because of Audrey's loan, Clara, Harrison says, his voice like gravel scraping against cold steel. They excluded you because tonight they are finalizing their plan to steal my mind, and you are the only one who would stop them. The phrase hangs in the air. Steal my mind. It is a chilling concept, far more sinister than simply stealing money. I pull the thick stack of legal documents from the envelope and spread them out across the smooth surface of the marble coffee table. The stark black ink on crisp white paper stands out against the luxurious setting of my penthouse. I am a commercial real estate developer. I spend half my life swimming in complex litigation, zoning ordinances, and corporate contracts. I know how to dissect a legal threat. I look at the bold capitalized heading on the very first page. Petition for adjudication of incompetency and appointment of plenary guardian. My heart turns to ice. This is not a simple financial dispute. This is a hostile takeover of a human life. The petitioners listed at the top of the document are my parents, Richard and Patricia. They have officially filed paperwork in the probate court of Cook County. I scan the allegations detailed in the subsequent paragraphs. They have constructed a completely fabricated, highly coordinated narrative of cognitive decline. They cite incidents that never happened. They describe periods of severe confusion, debilitating memory loss, and a total inability to manage personal or financial affairs. They claim that Harrison has become a danger to himself and his own legacy. They are leveraging his age against him, weaponizing his 78 years as proof of inherent vulnerability. They have attached an affidavit from a physician. I have never heard of a doctor who has likely been heavily compensated to sign a preliminary evaluation based entirely on Richard's biased testimony rather than an actual clinical examination. I read further, my eyes flying across the dense legal jargon. The petition requests that Richard be granted immediate emergency guardianship. It asks the court to strip Harrison of his right to make medical decisions, his right to determine his own residence, and most importantly, his absolute right to manage his sprawling commercial real estate portfolio. They want to legally erase you, I state, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. They want a judge to declare you a non-person so they can seize the keys to the kingdom. Exactly, Harrison replies. His jaw clenched so tightly the muscles twitch. Richard brought me to that massive new estate today under the guise of a private Thanksgiving tour. He told me it was a celebration, but once I was inside, he locked the doors to his new home office. He had a private notary and a sleazy estate lawyer waiting in the wings. He presented me with a voluntary surrender of my rights. He told me if I signed it quietly, I could live out my remaining years in comfort at the estate. He promised they would take good care of me, and if you refused, I ask already knowing the answer must involve the documents currently resting under my hands. If I refused, he threatened to serve me with this petition on Monday morning, Harrison says, pointing his cane at the coffee table. He threatened to drag me into a public courtroom parade, a string of paid experts to testify about my failing mind, and humiliate me in front of the entire Chicago business community. He wanted to break my pride. He thought threatening my dignity would force me to capitulate in the shadows. I sift through the remaining pages. I understand the mechanics of Harrison's wealth. The core of our family's empire is held within a massive, irrevocable trust. Harrison is the primary trustee. The trust documents are ironclad, designed specifically to prevent greedy heirs from accessing the principal capital before his death. There is only one loophole to trigger an early transfer of power. The primary trustee must be declared legally incompetent. But there is a glaring flaw in Richard's master plan. I look up from the documents, meeting my grandfather's gaze. Richard cannot just assume control of the trust, even if you are declared incompetent. I say, my analytical mind racing ahead of the immediate shock. I have read the original trust directives. I am listed as your alternate power of attorney. If you fall ill, the control of the entire portfolio transfers directly to me, not to my father. Why would he go through the trouble of declaring you incompetent if the power bypasses him anyway? Harrison offers a dark, humorless smile. Turn to the very last page of the packet, Clara. Look at the voluntary surrender agreement he tried to force me to sign. I flip the stack of papers over. My eyes scan the final document. It is a highly specific custom-drafted waiver. It requires Harrison to voluntarily acknowledge a decline in his mental faculties and to legally revoke his previous power of attorney designations. It explicitly removes my name from the succession line and inserts Richard as the sole absolute beneficiary of his legal authority. They needed you out of the picture today, Harrison explains, his voice resonating with cold fury. They needed you completely isolated, sitting alone in your penthouse, drowning in the emotional pain of their rejection. If you were at that house, you would have seen the trap immediately. You would have reviewed the documents. You would have called your corporate lawyers and shut the entire operation down before the notary even uncapped his pen. The sheer scale of their malice is staggering. They orchestrated the entire Thanksgiving boycott to clear the battlefield. They weaponized my emotional vulnerability to ensure I would not intervene while they executed a legal coup against my grandfather. They bought the $4 million estate with stolen trust funds to serve as both their victory palace and Harrison's gilded cage. I gather the legal documents and place them neatly back inside the craft envelope. The sting of the empty dining room is completely eradicated. The hurt is gone, replaced entirely by a surge of adrenaline and a burning desire for absolute retribution. My family has fundamentally misunderstood the nature of the woman they decided to betray. I am not a casualty. I am an apex predator in the corporate world, and they have just wandered directly into my hunting ground. They made a fatal miscalculation, grandfather, I say, standing up from the armchair. They forgot that I fight these kinds of legal wars for a living. The stage is set. The lines are drawn. The true legal warfare is about to begin. I sit back down at the marble coffee table, the firelight casting sharp reflections across the scattered pages. The adrenaline in my bloodstream shifts from a sudden spike into a steady, controlled burn. I pull the thick stack of legal documents back toward me. I do not just read them this time. I dissect them. I analyze every single clause, every bolded heading, and every cunningly crafted paragraph with the ruthless precision of a chief executive auditing a hostile takeover bid. The primary document is a drafted petition for the probate court. The petitioners are officially listed as Richard and Patricia. The sheer audacity of seeing my parents' names printed at the top of this legal assassination attempt makes my stomach turn. The petition formally requests that a judge declare Harrison mentally incompetent and entirely incapable of managing his personal and financial affairs. The basis of their claim relies on advanced age and alleged cognitive decline. I scan the fabricated evidence they have attached to support this outrageous claim. They have constructed a highly coordinated narrative filled with incidents that simply never happened. They describe periods of severe confusion. They allege debilitating memory loss. They even claim Harrison has developed a sudden inability to comprehend basic financial transactions. It is a masterclass in legal fiction. They have attached an affidavit from a physician I have never heard of before. This doctor has clearly been heavily compensated to sign a preliminary evaluation based entirely on Richard's biased testimony rather than an actual rigorous clinical examination of my grandfather. They are attempting to weaponize his 78 years of life against him. They want to use his age as indisputable proof of inherent vulnerability. They are asking the court to strip Harrison of his fundamental human rights. They want to revoke his ability to make his own medical decisions, his right to determine his own primary residence, and most importantly, his absolute right to manage his sprawling multi-million-dollar commercial real estate portfolio. I look across the table at Harrison. He is watching me read, his eyes burning with a fierce, unyielding clarity that absolutely defies the fictitious narrative printed on the pages in my hands. This is not a simple guardianship petition. I state, my voice dropping to a dangerous, icy register. This is a carefully orchestrated legal coup. They want a judge to declare you a non-person so they can seize the keys to the kingdom. That is exactly their goal, Harrison replies, his jaw clenched tightly. My entire life's work is locked inside an irrevocable trust. You know the structure of my wealth better than anyone else in this family, Clara. You know that I built that trust specifically to protect the principal capital from greedy heirs who want to liquidate assets for quick cash. He is absolutely right. The core of our family empire is held within that massive trust. Harrison is the primary trustee, and the documents governing that trust are famously ironclad. They were designed by top-tier estate lawyers to ensure that the wealth continues to generate revenue for generations, strictly preventing anyone like Richard or Connor from accessing the core funds to finance their vanity projects. There is no easy way to break the trust. There is only one loophole, I say, tracing the edge of the petition with my index finger. The primary trustee must be declared legally incapacitated. If a judge rules that you are no longer mentally fit to manage the portfolio, the trust's defense mechanisms disengage. The power of attorney automatically activates, transferring total control of all assets to your designated successor. This is the ultimate motive. Richard does not care about Harrison's health or well-being. Richard cares about the impenetrable wall surrounding the family fortune. By declaring Harrison incompetent, Richard plans to breach that wall and gain unfettered access to the liquid capital. That is how they funded the $4 million shell company purchase for the Lake Forest estate. They are preemptively draining the accounts, confident that they will soon have the legal authority to cover their tracks. But there is a massive, glaring flaw in Richard's master plan. I pull the original trust directives from the bottom of the stack and spread them out on the table. Richard cannot just assume control of the trust, even if you are declared incompetent. I explain, my analytical mind racing ahead to the inevitable legal battle. I know these original documents inside and out. I am listed as your alternate power of attorney. If you fall ill or lose your faculties, the control of the entire portfolio transfers directly to me, not to my father. Why would he go through the immense trouble and expense of declaring you incompetent if the power legally bypasses him entirely? Harrison offers a dark, humorless smile. He reaches over and taps the very last document in the stack. Read the voluntary surrender agreement he tried to force me to sign this afternoon, Harrison says, his voice resonating with cold fury. I pull the final document toward me. It is a highly specific, custom-drafted waiver. It requires Harrison to voluntarily acknowledge a severe decline in his mental faculties. But more importantly, it requires him to legally revoke his previous power of attorney designations. The document explicitly removes my name from the succession line. It inserts Richard as the sole absolute beneficiary of Harrison's legal and financial authority. The entire Thanksgiving boycott finally makes perfect, terrifying sense. They needed you out of the picture today, Harrison explains. They needed you completely isolated, sitting alone in your penthouse, drowning in the emotional pain of their rejection. If you were at that house today, you would have seen the trap immediately. You would have reviewed these documents. You would have called your corporate lawyers and shut the entire operation down before the notary even uncapped his pen. I stare at the voluntary surrender form. The sheer scale of their malice is staggering. They orchestrated the entire Thanksgiving blackout to clear the battlefield. They weaponized my emotional vulnerability to ensure I would not intervene while they executed a legal coup against my grandfather. They bought the $4 million estate with stolen trust funds to serve as both their victory palace and Harrison's gilded cage. Richard locked me in his new home office. Harrison continues, his hands gripping his cane. He had a private notary and a sleazy estate lawyer waiting in the wings. He told me if I signed this surrender quietly, I could live out my remaining years in luxury at the new estate. If I refused, he threatened to serve me with this court petition on Monday morning. He threatened to drag me into a public courtroom parade, a string of paid medical experts to testify about my failing mind and humiliate me in front of the entire Chicago business community. He wanted to break my pride. He thought threatening my dignity would force me to capitulate in the shadows before the courts open on Monday. The countdown has already started. We have until Monday morning before Richard files the petition and initiates a brutal public legal war. I gather the documents and place them neatly back inside the craft envelope. The sting of the empty dining room is completely eradicated. The hurt is gone, replaced entirely by a surge of adrenaline and a burning desire for absolute retribution. My family has fundamentally misunderstood the nature of the woman they decided to betray. I am not a casualty. I am an apex predator in the corporate world, and they have just wandered directly into my hunting ground. They made a fatal miscalculation, grandfather, I say, standing up from the armchair and looking down at the evidence of their treason. They forgot that I fight these kinds of legal wars for a living. The stage is set. The lines are drawn. The true legal warfare is about to begin. I step away from the coffee table and walk over to my custom wet bar, pouring myself a glass of sparkling water. The vintage red wine I poured earlier has entirely lost its appeal. Alcohol clouds judgment, and right now I require absolute microscopic clarity. I look back at my grandfather. He is watching me with a silent, approving intensity. The grief of being an abandoned daughter has entirely evaporated from my system. The hollow ache in my chest is completely gone. In its place is the cold, calculated precision of a chief executive officer preparing for a hostile corporate takeover. I do not feel betrayed anymore. I feel challenged, and nobody challenges my territory without facing catastrophic consequences. I return to the living room and sit opposite Harrison. My posture is rigid, my mind organizing data points at lightning speed. We are no longer a grandfather and a granddaughter seeking emotional comfort. We are two commanding officers in a war room outlining a lethal counteroffensive. My family expects us to be emotional. They expect me to be crying in my penthouse. They expect Harrison to be trembling in fear of a public court battle. They are relying on our predictable, desperate human reactions to execute their fraud. We will absolutely not give them that satisfaction. We do not play defense. I state, my voice stripped of any familial warmth. If we wait for Richard to file that petition on Monday morning, we are fighting on his timeline. We are letting him set the narrative in the probate court. We have to strip him of his leverage before the courthouse doors even open. Harrison nods slowly, his hands resting on the polished wood of his cane. Richard is heavily arrogant. Harrison says, his raspy voice steadying as the ambient warmth of the penthouse seeps into his bones. He assumes I will capitulate to avoid public humiliation. He assumes you will stay out of it because you are too hurt by their coordinated absence tonight. He thinks he holds all the cards because he currently has possession of the stolen funds and a drafted legal petition. I pull a blank legal notepad from my desk drawer and grab a heavy titanium pen. Arrogance creates massive blind spots. I reply, writing Richard and Patricia's names at the top of the crisp yellow page. They bought a $4 million estate with a shell company. They forged electronic signatures to wire those funds. That is not just a messy civil probate dispute, that is a federal crime. But we cannot just walk into the FBI without a bulletproof dossier. We need to build a multi-layered trap. I look at the structural blueprints resting on my drafting table. Constructing a trap is no different from constructing a luxury high-rise building. You need a solid foundation, impenetrable load, bearing pillars, and an execution schedule that leaves zero room for structural failure. I explain this to Harrison, outlining exactly how we will use their own hubris against them. We will let them weave their web of lies so tightly that they end up hanging themselves with it. I draw a harsh, dark line under my parents' names on the notepad. The foundation of our trap is absolute radio silence. I declare. We do not call them tonight. We do not text them. We do not demand explanations or hurl threats. Richard is waiting for my phone call. He is sitting in his stolen mansion right now waiting for me to call back so he can exert his patriarchal dominance and tell me to stay away. He wants the validation of my anger. He needs to know he hurt me. Harrison leans back into the plush leather sofa. If you remain silent, they will assume their psychological warfare was completely successful. He agrees, a grim, calculated smile touching his lips. They will think you are broken. They will think I am hiding in a hotel somewhere, too terrified of Monday morning to make a single move. They will celebrate their victory tonight, drink their expensive champagne, and sleep incredibly soundly. Let them sleep, I say, circling the word silence on my notepad with heavy dark ink. Let them enjoy their stolen luxury for one more night. The element of surprise is our greatest tactical asset. If we confront them now, they will scramble. They will contact their sleazy estate lawyer and try to accelerate their filings. They might even try to move the stolen capital offshore to a secure haven. We must keep them perfectly comfortable in their delusion of absolute control. We begin outlining the action steps for tomorrow. Friday morning, Black Friday. While millions of oblivious people crowd the shopping malls, Harrison and I will be orchestrating a financial and legal massacre. First, we eliminate their primary weapon, I say, tapping the titanium pen against the legal documents inside the craft envelope. Richard's entire petition hinges on the fabricated claim that you are suffering from severe cognitive decline. We have to obliterate that medical narrative before he even submits it to a judge. I pull up my digital Rolodex on my workstation monitor. I have extensive contacts in the medical community, from underwriting commercial leases for private healthcare conglomerates. Tomorrow morning, I am taking you to two independent, board-certified geriatric psychiatrists in downtown Chicago. They are the absolute best in the state. You will undergo the most rigorous cognitive evaluations currently available. Harrison nods, his eyes flashing with fierce, undeniable determination. I will pass them flawlessly, he asserts. I built a real estate empire from the ground up. I can memorize a sequence of words and draw a clock face better than a man half my age. I know you can, I reply smoothly. Once we have two heavily notarized, unassailable medical affidavits proving you are in the top 1% of cognitive function, Richard's petition becomes worthless paper. It becomes immediate grounds for a countersuit. After the medical evaluations, I continue, my voice steady and rhythmic. We move to the financial counteroffensive. We are going to trigger a comprehensive forensic audit. I will contact my lead corporate attorney at 7 in the morning. We will bypass standard probate lawyers and bring in vicious federal litigators. We will trace every single unauthorized wire transfer that left your subsidiary trust accounts over the last 6 months. We will tie the exact dollar amounts directly to the closing documents of the Legacy Heritage Holdings Shell Company. We will freeze their accounts before they can buy so much as a cup of coffee. We will sever their access to the capital they stole. Tomorrow we go on the offensive. Friday morning arrives with a brutal, freezing clarity. While the rest of America is trampling each other in crowded shopping malls for Black Friday discounts, my penthouse is a fortress of absolute silence and lethal intent. The digital clock on my desk flips to 5 in the morning. I have not slept a single minute. The adrenaline pumping through my veins has completely eradicated any need for rest. I leave Harrison asleep in the guest suite, his breathing finally steady and calm after the exhaustion of yesterday's ordeal. I walk into my home office carrying a steaming mug of black coffee and sit down at my primary workstation. The time for theoretical strategy is over. It is time for digital execution. I boot up my custom-built terminal. The 3 high-definition monitors hum to life, casting a stark blue light across my face. I bypass the standard consumer real estate websites immediately. Those public portals are heavily delayed and scrubbed of the granular data I require. Instead, I log directly into my redevelopment firm's proprietary databases. This is military-grade commercial real estate software. It taps directly into county clerk records, municipal zoning grids, and federal tax databases with zero latency. It is a system designed to uncover hidden liabilities in $40 million high-rises. Using it to hunt down my family's suburban purchase is like using a satellite to find a needle in a haystack. I open the saved file of Nia's Instagram livestream on my left monitor. I play it again, pausing at specific intervals to capture high-resolution screenshots. I am no longer looking at the arrogant faces of my family. I am looking right past them. I am analyzing the physical structure of the estate itself. I note the height of the vaulted ceilings. I calculate the approximate square footage of the grand foyer based on the size of the floor tiles. I observe the specific curvature of the custom wrought iron staircase. Most importantly, I look through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows visible behind my mother. The trees outside are mature old-growth oaks. The property line extends far back, suggesting a lot size of at least 2 acres. That specific combination of ultra-luxury new construction and expansive mature acreage eliminates 90% of the Chicago suburbs immediately. I turn to my center monitor and open the search parameters in my database. I input the target area: Lake Forest, Winnetka, Glencoe. I set the lot size minimum to 2 acres. I set the interior square footage minimum to 10,000 square feet. I filter for properties that have changed ownership within the last 45 days. The system processes the query in seconds. A list of 22 properties populates the screen. I narrow the parameters further. My family wanted a turnkey palace to show off immediately, which means they did not buy a fixer-upper. I filter for properties listed in pristine move-in ready condition. The list drops to 8. Now I apply the ultimate filter. I know Richard and Patricia do not have the liquid capital to secure a traditional jumbo mortgage for a house of this magnitude without raising massive red flags with their financial advisors. Connor and Nia certainly cannot qualify for a loan of this size. This had to be an under-the-radar acquisition. I select the financing type drop-down menu and check the box labeled cash transaction. The database blinks. The list of 8 properties vanishes. A single solitary address remains on my screen. I click on the address, opening the archived listing profile. A gallery of professional real estate photographs fills my right monitor. I pull up my screenshot of Nia standing in the kitchen and place it side by side with the listing photo of the kitchen. The match is absolute. The cascading veins of the Calicotta Gold Marble Island are identical. The positioning of the custom range hood is an exact match. The intricate wainscoting in the formal dining room aligns perfectly. This is the house. It is a magnificent, sprawling French provincial estate located on a highly secure private cul-de-sac in Lake Forest. The original asking price was $4.5 million. I scroll down to the transaction history. The property closed exactly 22 days ago. The final recorded sale price was $4.2 million. I lean closer to the monitor, my eyes scanning the data fields for the buyer information. When a normal person buys a house, their name is permanently etched into the public property deed. But people who are executing massive financial fraud do not put their names on the deed. They hide behind corporate veils. I open a secure portal to the Cook County Clerk of the Circuit Court. I input the property identification number and request the official recorded deed of trust. The document downloads to my desktop as a secure PDF. I open it, scrolling past the legal boilerplate and the seller's signatures until I reach the grantee section. The buyer is not listed as Richard. It is not listed as Patricia. It is not listed as Connor or Nia. The legal owner of the $4.2 million estate is a limited liability company. Legacy Heritage Holdings, LLC. I stare at the name of the shell company printed in stark black ink. My father's obsession with legacy has always been his most predictable trait. He could not resist naming his fraudulent corporate veil something grand and imposing. He thought he was being sophisticated. He thought establishing an LLC in Delaware or Wyoming would completely obscure the true ownership of the property and shield him from any personal liability. He is incredibly naive. A shell company only works if the person investigating it does not have the tools or the financial resources to pierce the corporate veil. Richard assumed I would be too devastated by the Thanksgiving boycott to look into the matter. He assumed I would just cry in my penthouse and accept my exile. He never imagined that 12 hours later, I would be sitting in my office tracking his stolen millions with the full technological arsenal of a premier redevelopment firm. The property deed confirms the method of purchase. It was a 100% cash transaction. $4.2 million was wired directly from a bank account to the title company on the day of closing. There is no mortgage lender. There is no lien. There is just a massive, inexplicable mountain of liquid cash that suddenly materialized to buy a mega mansion. I take a sip of my cold coffee, my mind working with brutal efficiency. I have found the house. I have found the shell company holding the deed. Now I need to find the specific human beings who registered that LLC, and I need to prove exactly which trust account they drained to get the cash. The hunt is accelerating. I switch my focus from the county property tax portal to the State Division of Corporations database. Delaware and Wyoming are the usual havens for corporate anonymity, but amateur criminals always make mistakes born of convenience. I search the Illinois Secretary of State Business Entity Registry first. My fingers strike the keys with rhythmic precision. I type in Legacy Heritage Holdings LLC. The registry query takes less than a second. The entity details populate my center screen. As I expected, the registered agent is a generic corporate filing service located in a strip mall in Springfield. This is standard procedure to keep the actual owners off the primary search results. But I am not a casual observer. I am a corporate executive who navigates shell companies every single day. I know that beneath the registered agent, there is always an incorporation document that requires the signature of the actual managing directors. I bypass the public summary and request the original articles of organization. The system prompts me for my professional credentials and a nominal processing fee. I authorize the charge immediately. The digitized document downloads to my secure local drive. I open it, scrolling past the standard liability protection clauses and the boilerplate operating agreements. I reach the final page detailing the authorized managing members of the limited liability company. There are two names printed clearly in black ink, Connor and Nia. I stare at the screen, a chilling mixture of disgust and dark amusement washing over me. Richard is a coward. My father orchestrated this entire financial coup. He masterminded the Thanksgiving boycott, and he intimidated my grandfather in a locked room. Yet when it came time to actually sign the legal documents for the shell company holding the stolen real estate, he did not use his own name. He used his desperately insecure son and his social media-obsessed daughter-in-law as the ultimate fall guys. Connor and Nia are legally on the hook for the corporate entity holding a $4 million stolen asset. I hear a soft shuffling sound behind me. I turn my chair to see Harrison standing in the doorway of my office. He is leaning on his carved wooden cane, dressed in the spare clothes I provided him last night. Despite the early hour, his eyes are sharp and alert. He has clearly sensed the shift in the atmosphere of the penthouse. I gesture toward the screen. I tell him I found the house. I tell him I found the shell company. I point directly to the names of his grandson and his grandson's wife listed as the managing directors. Harrison walks slowly toward my desk. He looks at the articles of organization displayed on the monitor. His jaw tightens, the muscles working furiously under his weathered skin. He does not express shock. He expresses the cold, calculating fury of a man who has just confirmed a treasonous act within his own ranks. They need capital to fund a $4 million cash closing. Harrison says, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. They did not get a mortgage. They bypassed the primary trust defense mechanisms because they have not yet successfully declared me incompetent. That leaves only one vulnerable point of entry. He reaches into his pocket and retrieves his secure encrypted smartphone. This device is completely separate from his public phone. It is linked directly to the private wealth management portals of his secondary holding accounts. These are subsidiary trust accounts, liquid capital reserves designed to fund commercial property acquisitions and cover emergency corporate liabilities. They are accounts he checks infrequently because they are meant to sit dormant until a massive transaction is required. Harrison authenticates his identity using biometric scans and complex passcodes. I watch as the private banking dashboard materializes on his screen. He navigates to the subsidiary holding accounts. He taps on the primary liquid reserve. The color instantly drains from his face. He lowers the phone slightly, his breathing shallow. He places the device flat on my desk so I can see the screen. The account balance is completely decimated. I pull the phone closer. I open the transaction history and filter by outgoing wire transfers. The screen displays a systematic, highly coordinated bleeding of capital. Over the last 6 months, massive sums of money have been siphoned out of the subsidiary trust. $300,000 here, $500,000 there. The final devastating blow is a single outgoing wire transfer processed 22 days ago. It is for exactly $4.2 million. The destination account for that final wire transfer is listed as the escrow account for a title company in Lake Forest, the exact title company that closed the transaction for Legacy Heritage Holdings, LLC. They bled the subsidiary accounts dry. I state my voice devoid of any emotion. They transferred the funds in strategic increments over 6 months to avoid triggering the automated high-volume alerts on the primary trust. Then they executed the final kill shot to close on the estate. I never authorized a single one of these transfers, Harrison says, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. Every outgoing wire from these specific accounts requires dual-factor authentication and my direct electronic signature. The bank would never release $4 million without a signed authorization form. Harrison contacts his private wealth manager directly through the secure emergency channel on his phone. He does not explain the situation. He simply demands the digitized authorization forms for the last 6 months of wire transfers from the subsidiary account. Within 5 minutes, a heavily encrypted file arrives in his secure inbox. We open it on my large monitor. The documents are flawlessly executed, the account numbers are correct, the routing numbers are precise, and at the bottom of every single authorization form is an electronic signature. It is a perfect digital replica of Harrison's signature. I zoom in on the electronic signature. I analyze the metadata attached to the digital ink. This is not a manual forgery. I explain, tracing the pixels on the screen. They did not try to copy your handwriting with a pen. They captured a high-resolution image of your legitimate signature from a previous corporate contract. They digitized it, converted it into a transparent vector graphic, and applied it to these wire authorizations using document editing software. It is a digital stamp. It is perfectly identical every single time because it is literally a copy-and-paste operation. Harrison stares at his forged signature. The magnitude of their betrayal is fully unmasked in the cold blue light of the monitors. This is no longer a family dispute. This is no longer a petty argument over a Thanksgiving dinner or a rejected business loan. The parameters of the conflict have fundamentally shifted into an entirely different legal universe. They forged your signature to drain your accounts, I say, laying out the absolute terrifying reality of their actions. They used electronic communications to execute the theft across state lines and through federal banking institutions. That elevates this from simple theft to federal wire fraud. It is a serious felony under federal law. I point to the images of the Lake Forest estate still open on my other monitor. Nia's perfect new house was bought with stolen money. Every single brick of that $4 million mansion is funded by the proceeds of a federal crime. They did not just buy a house. They purchased a massive piece of criminal evidence. Connor and Nia are listed as the managing directors of the shell company that received the stolen funds. Richard orchestrated the theft and the forgery. Patricia facilitated the cover-up. Audrey is complicit in the enjoyment of the stolen assets. They have all implicated themselves in a massive coordinated federal conspiracy. The stakes are no longer about inheritance or hurt feelings. The stakes are federal indictments, asset forfeiture, and decades in a federal penitentiary. I look at my grandfather. He is not a broken old man. He is a titan who has just been handed the exact weapon he needs to utterly annihilate his enemies. I stand up from my desk and turn toward Harrison. The digital clock on my workstation now reads 6 in the morning. The sun has not even begun to rise over Lake Michigan, but the city below is already stirring with the chaotic manufactured urgency of Black Friday. People are fighting over discounted televisions and discounted blenders. I'm about to launch a multi-million-dollar offensive to dismantle a federal fraud ring operating within my own family. The financial trail is secure. I tell my grandfather, my voice resonating with absolute cold certainty. I have the deed. I have the shell company registration. I have the forged wire transfers. Now we eliminate their primary weapon. We are going to obliterate the foundation of their legal petition before they even file it. Harrison nods, his grip tightening on the head of his carved wooden cane. He understands the strategy perfectly. Richard's entire case rests on the fabricated premise that Harrison is suffering from severe, debilitating dementia. If we destroy that narrative with overwhelming, undeniable medical evidence, the guardianship petition becomes not just frivolous, but a malicious, actionable offense. I pull up my personal contacts and dial a number. It is Dr. Alistair Vance, a highly respected board-certified geriatric psychiatrist affiliated with Northwestern Memorial Hospital. I have known Dr. Vance for years through my redevelopment firm's philanthropic initiatives. He is brilliant, meticulous, and absolutely incorruptible. He does not take emergency appointments on a holiday weekend, but when I explain the nature of the situation and the sheer staggering magnitude of the financial fraud involved, he agrees to open his private clinic immediately. Get dressed, grandfather, I say, grabbing my tailored wool coat and my leather briefcase. We are going downtown. You are about to take the most important test of your life. The drive to the clinic is swift and silent. The streets are mostly empty in our immediate vicinity, the heavy snow dampening the usual sounds of the city. We arrive at Dr. Vance's sleek, modern office suite, just as the sun begins to break through the gray clouds. Dr. Vance is waiting for us, his demeanor entirely professional. He understands the gravity of the legal threat hanging over Harrison's head. We need a comprehensive cognitive evaluation, I explain, handing Dr. Vance a copy of the fabricated medical affidavit Richard attached to the guardianship petition. This is what they are claiming. We need to prove beyond any shadow of a doubt that this document is a complete fiction. Dr. Vance reviews the fabricated affidavit. He scoffs softly, his professional disdain evident. This reads like a poorly researched internet article on dementia, he remarks, tossing the document onto his desk. It lacks any specific clinical observations or standardized testing metrics. It is entirely subjective. He turns to Harrison. Mr. Harrison, this evaluation will take several hours. We will be conducting a battery of standardized tests, including the Montreal Cognitive Assessment and the Mini Mental State Examination, as well as a detailed clinical interview. It will be rigorous. Proceed, doctor, Harrison replies, his voice steady and commanding. He settles into the examination chair with the posture of a monarch preparing for battle. I have a real estate empire to protect. I do not have time for cognitive decline. I wait in the reception area, pacing the floor, my phone constantly buzzing with incoming data packets from my corporate legal team. I am already coordinating the next phase of the offensive. After 3 grueling hours, the heavy oak door of the examination room finally opens. Dr. Vance steps out, followed by Harrison, who looks remarkably energized despite the lengthy testing process. The results are unequivocal, Dr. Vance states, walking over to his desk and pulling out a fresh stack of official medical letterhead. Mr. Harrison is not merely competent, he is exceptionally sharp. His cognitive function, memory recall, and executive reasoning are in the top 1 percentile for his age demographic. The claims made in that petition are entirely baseless and frankly clinically absurd. I let out a sharp breath, the tension in my chest loosening just a fraction. I need that in writing, doctor. I need an unassailable affidavit heavily notarized explicitly detailing his perfect cognitive health. You will have it. Dr. Vance promises, already drafting the document. But I am not satisfied with just one evaluation. in high-stakes corporate litigation redundancy is survival. I immediately contact a second specialist, Dr. Evelyn Thorne, the chief of geriatric neurology at the University of Chicago Medical Center. I deploy the same urgency, the same leverage, and secure an afternoon appointment. We repeat the entire grueling process. Harrison sits through another 3 hours of intensive cognitive testing, memory exercises, and neurological assessments. He does not complain. He does not waver. He executes every task with the ruthless focus of a man fighting for his freedom and his legacy. By 4 in the afternoon, we are standing in Dr. Thorne's office. The results are identical. Mr. Harrison possesses the cognitive acuity of a man 20 years his junior. Dr. Thorne declares, handing me a thick sealed folder containing her official evaluation. I have sworn to this under penalty of perjury. His mental faculties are entirely intact. I take the folder, adding it to my leather briefcase alongside Dr. Vance's affidavit. The weight of the documents feels immense, heavy with the power to completely annihilate Richard's entire legal strategy. We step out of the hospital and into the biting cold of the late afternoon. The sky is darkening, the city lights illuminating the falling snow. We have spent Black Friday securing the ultimate defense. We have 2 separate, highly respected independent medical professionals who have sworn under oath that Harrison is perfectly sane. The incompetency claim is dead in the water, I tell Harrison as we slide into the back of our waiting car. If Richard tries to file that petition on Monday morning, we will bury him under a mountain of medical evidence. The judge will throw the case out before lunch, and Richard will be sanctioned for filing a fraudulent petition. Harrison leans back against the leather seat, his eyes closed, a faint smile touching his lips. We have secured the Fortress Clara. Now it is time to load the cannons. I pull out my phone and dial my lead corporate attorney. The defensive maneuvers are complete. It is time to assemble the federal case and drop the guillotine. Section 14, 1,000 words. I direct my driver to head straight to the towering glass and steel skyscraper in the financial district that houses my corporate legal team. The building is largely deserted, the usual swarm of executives and paralegals absent due to the holiday weekend. But the 75th floor is ablaze with light. My lead attorney, Marcus Sterling, does not take holidays when a client uncovers a multi-million-dollar federal fraud conspiracy. Marcus is a shark in a bespoke suit. He specializes in high-stakes corporate litigation, asset recovery, and white-collar criminal defense. He is not a genteel probate lawyer who negotiates family squabbles over silver tea sets. He is a legal predator who destroys hostile entities with overwhelming, relentless force. I pay him an exorbitant retainer specifically for moments like this. Harrison and I step off the elevator and walk directly into the main conference room. Marcus is waiting for us, surrounded by 3 junior partners and a forensic accountant. The massive digital screens on the walls are already displaying the initial data packets I forwarded to him earlier today. Clara, Marcus greets me, his expression deadly serious. He turns to Harrison with a respectful nod. Mr. Harrison, we have reviewed the initial findings. The sheer audacity of this operation is staggering. I place my heavy leather briefcase on the long mahogany conference table. I do not sit down. I stand at the head of the table, commanding the room. This is no longer a family matter, Marcus, I state, my voice echoing in the large room. This is a coordinated multi-million-dollar theft. They used electronic communications to forge signatures, bypass dual-factor authentication, and wire $4.2 million across state lines to purchase a luxury estate under a shell corporation. They are currently occupying that stolen asset and celebrating their crime. Marcus nods, his eyes sharp and calculating. We have pulled the deed for Legacy Heritage Holdings, LLC. We have the articles of organization listing Connor and Nia as the managing directors. Our forensic accountant has tracked the exact routing numbers and timestamps of the outgoing wire transfers from the subsidiary trust accounts. And the medical petition? I ask, pulling the thick stack of fabricated documents from the craft envelope and sliding them across the table. Marcus scans the first page of Richard's petition. A cold, contemptuous smirk crosses his face. This is a desperate, sloppy attempt at a legal coup. They are trying to establish a guardianship to retroactively cover their tracks and gain legal control over the funds they have already stolen. They assume you will be too busy fighting the competency claim to notice the missing capital. I open my briefcase and pull out the two sealed folders containing the medical affidavits from Dr. Vance and Dr. Thorne. I drop them onto the table with a heavy, satisfying thud. They miscalculated, I announce. These are rigorous, comprehensive cognitive evaluations from two of the top geriatric psychiatrists in Chicago. Both doctors have sworn under oath that Harrison is in the top 1 percentile of cognitive function. The incompetency claim is entirely fictitious. Marcus picks up the affidavits, his eyes scanning the official letterhead and the notarized signatures. His smile widens into something predatory and lethal. This is the kill shot, Clara. We do not just defend against their petition. We obliterate it. And we use it as evidence of their malicious intent to defraud. We spend the next 4 hours assembling the federal case. The conference room becomes a war room. We compile the forensic accounting of the stolen funds, meticulously linking every forged wire transfer directly to the cash closing of the Lake Forest estate. We attach the proof of the Shell LLC, clearly implicating Connor and Nia in the receipt of stolen property. We bundle the psychiatric evaluations proving that Richard and Patricia engaged in a fraudulent legal conspiracy to incapacitate a perfectly sane man. This is not a disorganized pile of accusations. It is a highly structured, heavily documented, irrefutable dossier of federal crimes. The trap is set, Marcus declares, leaning back in his chair, looking at the finalized digital files displayed on the monitors. The evidence is absolute. The question is, how do you want to pull the trigger? We strike first. I command, my voice unyielding. I want an emergency freeze placed on every single trust account, subsidiary account, and personal holding connected to this family immediately. Sever their access to the capital. They do not get to buy a single cup of coffee with my grandfather's money. I have already drafted the emergency injunction. Marcus confirms, tapping his keyboard. It will be filed electronically with the federal court system the moment the servers open. The freeze will be absolute and immediate. Next? I continue, my eyes narrowing as I envision the arrogant faces of my family celebrating in their stolen mansion. I want this preliminary fraud dossier submitted directly to the Financial Crimes Division of the FBI. Do not wait for a civil trial. I want federal agents looking at this money trail by Monday morning. The submission portal is prepped, Marcus says, his fingers hovering over the mouse. The moment you give the word, the federal authorities will have the entire case. The legal guillotine is raised high above their heads. The blade is sharpened. The rope is ready to be cut. My family is currently sitting in a $4 million estate, drinking expensive champagne, laughing at my perceived weakness, completely oblivious to the fact that their entire lives are about to be dismantled by federal litigators. They think they have won. They have no idea that their destruction is already inevitable. Do not file the FBI dossier yet, I say, a cold, dangerous smile forming on my lips. Keep the injunction ready. I want to look them in the eyes when they realize they have lost everything. I want to see their arrogance shatter. Harrison stands up from his chair, gripping his cane. He looks at the screens, then at me. His expression is one of absolute, terrifying resolve. Tomorrow is Saturday, Harrison says, his voice rumbling with anticipation. They will be hosting their leftover brunch. They will be showing off their stolen palace to their wealthy friends. It is the perfect time for a family reunion. I end the call and instruct my driver to head straight to the heart of the Chicago financial district. The defensive maneuvers are complete. It is time to assemble the federal case and drop the guillotine. The sleek black town car navigates the snow-covered streets, sliding past the festive holiday displays that adorn the storefronts. While the rest of the city is consumed by the chaotic frenzy of Black Friday shopping, my grandfather and I are embarking on a mission of absolute financial annihilation. I look over at Harrison sitting beside me. The exhaustion that plagued him yesterday has been entirely burned away by the fires of retribution. He holds his carved wooden cane with a grip of iron, his eyes fixed on the towering skyscrapers ahead. We arrive at a monolithic glass and steel high-rise that dominates the skyline. This is the headquarters of my corporate legal team. I do not employ gentle family practice attorneys who mediate domestic squabbles over holiday dinners. I retain apex predators. I pay exorbitant hourly rates for federal litigators who specialize in hostile corporate takeovers, asset recovery, and white-collar criminal defense. My lead attorney, Donovan Reed, is the sharpest weapon in my arsenal. He is a legal shark who dismantles hostile entities with overwhelming and relentless force. I called him an hour ago, demanding he open his office on a holiday weekend. When you uncover a multi-million-dollar federal fraud conspiracy within your own bloodline, holidays cease to exist. Harrison and I step out of the private elevator onto the 75th floor. The expansive lobby is deserted, but the main corner conference room is ablaze with stark white light. Donovan is waiting for us. He stands at the head of a massive mahogany table flanked by 3 junior partners and a senior forensic accountant. Large digital displays line the walls of the war room ready to process the data we are about to feed them. Donovan greets me with a curt nod, his expression deadly serious. He turns to my grandfather, extending a hand with genuine respect. We do not waste time exchanging pleasantries. I walk directly to the center of the room and place my heavy leather briefcase onto the polished wood table. The rhythmic click of the brass latches opening sounds like the cocking of a loaded weapon. I address the room, my voice echoing with icy, commanding authority. This is no longer a family matter, Donovan. This is a coordinated multi-million-dollar financial theft. They utilized electronic communications to forge signatures, bypass dual-factor authentication, and wire $4.2 million across state lines. They used that stolen capital to purchase a luxury estate under a hastily constructed shell corporation. They are currently occupying that stolen asset, drinking champagne, and celebrating their crime. Donovan's eyes sharpen. He gestures to his forensic accountant. We have already initiated the preliminary tracing based on the account routing numbers you sent over from the car, Donovan says. We pulled the deed for Legacy Heritage Holdings, LLC. We have the articles of organization listing your brother Connor and his wife Nia as the managing directors. Our team is currently mapping the exact timestamps of the outgoing wire transfers from the subsidiary trust accounts. The digital footprints are incredibly sloppy. They left a trail of evidence a mile wide. I reach into my briefcase and pull out the thick stack of fabricated legal documents Richard tried to force Harrison to sign. I slide the craft envelope across the mahogany table, and here is their motive, I announce. Donovan pulls the drafted petition from the envelope. He scans the first page, reading Richard and Patricia's request to have Harrison declared mentally incompetent. A cold, contemptuous smirk crosses the lawyer's face. He tosses the document back onto the table with professional disdain. This is a desperate, pathetic attempt at a legal coup, Donovan states. They are trying to establish an emergency guardianship to retroactively cover their tracks. They want legal control over the funds they have already stolen. They assumed you would be too busy fighting the competency claim in probate court to notice the missing capital. I open the secondary compartment of my briefcase and retrieve the 2 sealed folders containing the medical affidavits we secured earlier today. I drop them onto the table with a heavy, satisfying thud. They miscalculated, I declare. These are rigorous, comprehensive cognitive evaluations from 2 of the top independent geriatric psychiatrists in Chicago. Both doctors have sworn under oath under penalty of perjury that Harrison is in the top 1 percentile of cognitive function. The incompetency claim is not just entirely fictitious. It is now actionable defamation. Donovan picks up the affidavits. He reviews the official medical letterheads and the heavily notarized signatures. His smile widens into something truly predatory. This is the kill shot, Clara, he says, his voice vibrating with lethal anticipation. We do not just defend against their probate petition, we completely obliterate it. And we use their fabricated filing as direct evidence of their malicious intent to defraud. For the next 4 hours, the conference room transforms into an active military command center. We assemble the federal case piece by piece. We compile the forensic accounting of the stolen funds, meticulously linking every forged wire transfer directly to the cash closing of the Lake Forest estate. We attach the proof of the Shell LLC, clearly and undeniably implicating Connor and Nia in the receipt of stolen property and federal wire fraud. We bundle the psychiatric evaluations proving beyond a reasonable doubt that Richard and Patricia engaged in a fraudulent legal conspiracy to incapacitate a perfectly sane man to facilitate their theft. This is not a disorganized pile of emotional accusations. It is a highly structured, heavily documented, irrefutable dossier of federal crimes. It outlines violations of Title 18 of the United States Code, specifically wire fraud and conspiracy. The trap is perfectly set, Donovan declares. He leans back in his leather chair, looking at the finalized digital files displayed across the massive wall monitors. The evidence is absolute. The question now is how you want to pull the trigger. We strike first, I command, my voice unyielding and devoid of any mercy. I want an ex parte emergency freeze placed on every single trust account, subsidiary account, and personal holding connected to this family immediately. Sever their access to the capital. I want their credit cards declined. I want their bank accounts locked. They do not get to buy a single cup of coffee with my grandfather's money ever again. Donovan taps his keyboard with rapid precision. I have already drafted the emergency injunction, he confirms. It is being routed to a federal judge right now. Because of the overwhelming evidence of ongoing wire fraud, the freeze will be granted and executed instantly. Their financial lifelines are officially severed. Next, I continue, my eyes narrowing as I envision the arrogant faces of my parents celebrating in their stolen mansion. I want this complete preliminary fraud dossier submitted directly to the Financial Crimes Division of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Do not wait for a civil trial. I want federal agents looking at this money trail by Monday morning. The submission portal is prepped. Donovan says, his finger hovering over the mouse. The moment you give the word, the federal authorities will have the entire case. The legal guillotine is raised high above their heads. The blade is sharpened. The rope is ready to be cut. My family is currently sitting in a $4 million estate, drinking expensive champagne, laughing at my perceived weakness, completely oblivious to the fact that their entire lives are about to be dismantled by federal litigators. They think they have won. They have no idea that their destruction is already inevitable. Do not file the federal dossier just yet, I say, a cold, dangerous smile forming on my lips. Let the financial freeze take effect, but hold the FBI submission until I give the signal. I want to look them in the eyes when they realize they have lost everything. I want to see their arrogance shatter in real time. Harrison stands up from his chair, gripping his carved cane. He looks at the glowing digital monitors, then turns to look at me. His expression is one of absolute terrifying resolve. He is a king reclaiming his stolen throne. Tomorrow is Saturday, Harrison says, his voice rumbling with dark anticipation. They will be hosting their leftover brunch. They will be showing off their stolen palace to their wealthy, superficial friends. It is the perfect time for a family reunion. Saturday arrives with the blinding, frigid clarity. The blizzard has passed, leaving Chicago buried under a pristine layer of snow. But the roads to Lake Forest have been meticulously plowed for the suburban elite. I secure a private black SUV to transport Harrison and me. We are not arriving in our own vehicles. The element of surprise requires absolute stealth. As we drive north along Lake Michigan, Harrison remains silent, his grip white-knuckled around his carved wooden cane. The tension in the car is heavy, vibrating with the electric anticipation of the coming confrontation. We reach the gated community precisely at noon. The massive wrought iron gates swing open smoothly for our hired driver, granting us entry into a neighborhood that reeks of old money and new arrogance. We turn onto a sprawling private cul-de-sac and pull up to the estate. The sheer scale of the stolen property is staggering in person. It is a modern French provincial fortress, built from imported limestone, sitting on at least 3 acres of expertly manicured snow-covered lawns. The circular driveway is jammed with luxury vehicles. Mercedes, Range Rovers, and Porsches, belonging to my family's shallow status-obsessed social circle. They are hosting a lavish leftover brunch, parading their stolen wealth in front of an audience to solidify their newly elevated position in society. I help Harrison out of the SUV. The freezing air bites at our faces, but neither of us shivers. We walk slowly up the heated stamped concrete pathway leading to the grand entrance. The front facade is dominated by massive arched double doors made of solid mahogany, accented with custom brass hardware. It is a monument to their greed paid for with a fraudulent $4 million wire transfer. I do not bother ringing the bell. I push the heavy double doors open and we step directly into the lion's den. The grand foyer is a cavernous space echoing with the sounds of a wildly expensive party. A string quartet is playing softly in the corner. Waitstaff in crisp uniforms are circulating with trays of mimosas and gourmet hors d'oeuvres. The air smells of expensive perfume, roasted meat, and absolute entitlement. I stand just inside the threshold, my tailored coat pristine, my posture radiating the commanding authority of a CEO. Beside me, Harrison leans on his cane, his eyes sweeping the room with the lethal focus of a general surveying a battlefield. It takes exactly 4 seconds for the atmosphere to shatter. A waiter carrying a tray of champagne freezes in his tracks. A guest near the staircase stops mid-sentence. The ripple effect is instantaneous. The clinking of crystal glasses abruptly halts. The string quartet, sensing the sudden suffocating tension, falters and stops playing entirely. The chaotic, joyful noise of the brunch dies in a wave of terrifying silence. My eyes lock onto the center of the great room. Patricia and Richard are standing by the massive stone fireplace holding court among their friends. The color instantly drains from Patricia's face, her glass trembling in her manicured hand. Richard's arrogant smile vanishes, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated panic. The shock on their faces is palpable, raw, and absolutely devastating. They thought they had won. They thought we were broken. They never expected us to walk right through their front doors. The paralyzing silence lasts for only a few fleeting seconds before Richard's survival instincts kick in. His initial panic rapidly dissolves, immediately replaced by the suffocating arrogance that has defined his entire life. He straightens his posture, pulling his shoulders back as he steps away from the massive stone fireplace. He assumes the stance of a benevolent, victorious patriarch surveying his conquered subjects. In his deeply flawed perception of reality, this is not a calculated ambush. This is a desperate surrender. He actually believes the freezing Chicago blizzard broke his elderly father overnight. He thinks Harrison spent a miserable, terrifying night in some cheap hotel and has now returned crawling back to the luxury estate for shelter and warmth. Furthermore, he looks at my immaculate tailored coat and cold expression and completely misinterprets it. He assumes I have finally realized the brutal consequences of financial and social isolation, and that I have come to grovel and beg for my position back in the family hierarchy. "Well," Richard announces, his booming voice shattering the quiet tension in the vast room. He forces a loud, artificial laugh that fools absolutely no one in the crowd. "It seems the prodigal daughter has finally realized her place, and my father has decided to come in from the cold." Out of the corner of my eye, I spot sudden movement. Nia, ever the opportunistic influencer, slinks toward the edge of the grand marble staircase. She subtly pulls her smartphone from her designer purse, angling the camera lens directly at my face. The recording light blinks on. She is trying to capture this confrontation, desperate to spin a lucrative social media narrative of the unhinged, jealous sister showing up uninvited to ruin a beautiful, elegant holiday brunch. She wants to bait me into a screaming match for her followers. I do not even blink in her direction. I completely refuse to give her the manic, emotional reaction she desperately craves. Richard ignores the frightened, wealthy guests surrounding him and marches straight toward the foyer. He reaches into the breast pocket of his tailored suit jacket and pulls out a stack of folded legal papers. The voluntary surrender documents. The exact same fraudulent papers he tried to force upon my grandfather yesterday afternoon in a locked office. He stops a few feet away from us, waving the documents in the air with supreme, unearned confidence. He does not offer a polite greeting. He does not offer an apology. He delivers a brutal ultimatum. "Sign the medical POA, Dad." Richard commands, his voice dropping into a harsh, threatening register meant to intimidate. Sign the paperwork and surrender the trust. Do it quietly right now, or we humiliate you in court on Monday morning and let a judge strip you of everything publicly." Richard then turns his hostile, dismissive glare directly onto me, pointing a rigid finger back toward the massive mahogany double doors. "And Clara, get out of our house. You chose your spreadsheets over your sister. You are not welcome in this legacy." Before I can even formulate a response to Richard, Audrey pushes her way to the front of the gathering. She is holding a crystal glass of mimosa, her designer dress practically glowing under the opulent lighting. Emboldened by our father's aggressive posturing, she steps right up to me. The smug, self-satisfied smirk from the Instagram live video has returned to her face, magnified now by the presence of her wealthy audience. "You heard him," Audrey sneers, her voice carrying easily across the silent, echoing foyer. "Go back to your empty, lonely penthouse, Clara. You are just jealous because we finally stopped begging for your scraps. We are protecting the family legacy now. We do not need your toxic energy, and we certainly do not need your money." I stand perfectly still. I absorb the insults without a single flinch, my expression an unreadable mask of corporate composure. Inside, my analytical mind is operating at maximum capacity. I recognize the tactical advantage presenting itself right in front of me. They are surrounded by dozens of high society friends, business partners, and socialites. Nia is still holding her phone up the red recording light, blinking steadily, broadcasting this entire confrontation to the digital world. This is the perfect moment to let their arrogance seal their fate. I do not yell. I do not defend my penthouse or my life choices. Instead, I deploy a calculated strategic retreat of ego, creating a massive vacuum for their narcissism to fill. "You bought a $4 million estate in cash, Audrey," I state evenly, my voice projecting clearly to the captivated audience of guests. "That is an incredibly impressive acquisition for someone who was asking for a seed loan just last week. It takes remarkable financial maneuvering to execute a closing of this magnitude so quickly." The bait is irresistible. Audrey puffs out her chest, completely missing the trap. "It is called making smart financial maneuvers," Audrey boasts loudly, lifting her chin. "Connor and Nia secured the corporate entity and Dad directed the capital. We worked together as a real family to acquire this estate. We did not need your condescending loan." Connor steps forward to stand beside his sister, completely unable to resist the opportunity to stroke his own ego in front of his wife's followers and their affluent guests. "That is right," Connor announces, gesturing expansively around the grand foyer. "Legacy Heritage Holdings is our company. We closed on this property free and clear. No banks, no mortgages, no begging for your approval. We moved the capital ourselves. We took control of our own destiny," Richard adds, his chest swelling with patriarchal pride. "We executed a flawless cash acquisition to secure this sanctuary." I look at the three of them. They have just loudly, proudly, and publicly claimed ownership of the shell company. They have openly confessed to directing the movement of the capital. They have verified the cash transaction. They are actively bragging about the exact mechanics of a massive federal wire fraud scheme in a room full of witnesses, all while being recorded on a live broadcast. They have just dug their own graves, and they are completely oblivious to the fact that they are already standing at the bottom of them. The profound silence in the grand foyer stretches for a long, agonizing moment, as the reality of their public confession hangs in the air. I do not need to say another word. The trap has been sprung flawlessly. It is time for the execution. I step aside, yielding the floor. My grandfather moves forward. He does not rush. He does not raise his voice or match Richard's aggressive, booming volume. The sharp, rhythmic thud of his carved wooden cane against the imported Italian marble floor echoes like a ticking clock counting down the final seconds of their reign. The crowd of wealthy guests parts automatically, instinctively sensing the immense quiet authority radiating from the elderly patriarch. Harrison reaches the elegantly decorated accent table where Richard had casually tossed his mimosa glass next to a plate of gourmet brunch appetizers. He reaches into the inner pocket of his immaculate wool coat. He retrieves the two heavy sealed folders containing the comprehensive cognitive evaluations we secured yesterday morning. With a swift, deliberate motion, Harrison drops the thick medical dossiers directly onto the table, right on top of Richard's brunch plate. The heavy folders land with a loud, definitive smack, sending a physical shockwave through the immediate circle of guests. "I am not losing my mind, Richard," Harrison says. His voice is not loud, but it possesses a lethal, gravelly frequency that completely slices through the tension in the room. "But you are about to lose everything else." Richard stares at the folders. The arrogant, triumphant smirk he wore just a moment ago falters. His hand reaches out, trembling slightly, to pick up the top dossier. He breaks the seal and pulls out the first page. It is the notarized sworn affidavit from the leading geriatric psychiatrist detailing Harrison's flawless performance in the top 1 percentile of cognitive function. Richard's eyes dart frantically across the crisp medical letterhead, absorbing the clinical jargon that entirely dismantles his strategy. I watch the blood completely drain from my father's face. His complexion shifts from a flushed, arrogant red to a sickening, chalky pale within seconds. His breathing turns shallow and rapid. He flips to the second folder, tearing it open to find an identical, unassailable medical declaration from the chief of geriatric neurology. The physical manifestation of his panic is absolute. The fabricated probate court petition in his hand, the very document he intended to use to hold Harrison hostage, is now worse than worthless. It is documented proof of a malicious, fraudulent conspiracy. His entire leverage has been legally and medically obliterated. "You see, Richard," Harrison continues, his tone laced with absolute disgust. "When you try to declare a perfectly sane man legally incompetent, you had better ensure he does not spend his holiday acquiring ironclad board-certified proof of his exceptional mental acuity. Your petition is dead." The gathered socialites and business partners exchange horrified, confused glances. The veneer of the perfect wealthy family hosting a flawless holiday brunch is fracturing irreparably. Richard tries to formulate a response, opening his mouth to speak, but no words materialize. He simply stares at the medical evaluations, his hands shaking violently as the terrifying reality of his situation finally breaches his arrogance. The foundation of his massive theft has just collapsed beneath his feet. With Richard completely paralyzed by the medical affidavits, I take control of the floor. The guests are frozen in stunned silence, their champagne glasses lowered as they watch the destruction of their hosts. I open my leather briefcase and extract the final devastating piece of our counter-offensive, the thick forensic accounting dossier and the corporate registration files. I do not raise my voice. I speak with the chilling, measured cadence of a corporate executioner delivering a final verdict. "You were exceptionally arrogant to brag about your financial maneuvers, Connor," I state, turning my gaze directly onto my older brother and his influencer wife. Nia lowers her phone, her hands suddenly trembling as the reality of her live broadcast backfires. "Because you just publicly confessed to managing the shell company that received $4.2 million in stolen capital." I hold up the articles of organization displaying their signatures to the crowd. "You bypassed the primary trust because you could not secure the incompetency ruling. Instead, you targeted the subsidiary holding accounts. Over the last 6 months, you and your father orchestrated a systematic draining of liquid assets. You finalized the theft 22 days ago with a single massive wire transfer to the title company to purchase this exact estate in cash." Connor opens his mouth to deny it, but his bravado has entirely vanished. He looks terrified. "Do not bother lying," I command, sliding the digitized wire authorization forms onto the accent table, right next to Richard's ruined brunch plate. "We have the forensic audit. We know exactly how you did it. You captured a high-resolution image of grandfather's signature from an old contract, converted it into a transparent vector graphic, and pasted it onto outgoing wire requests. You bypassed dual-factor authentication and moved millions across state lines. That is not a family misunderstanding. That is federal wire fraud, and it carries a 20-year prison sentence." Nia lets out a sharp, horrified gasp. The wealthy socialites and business partners surrounding them begin stepping physically backward, desperate to distance themselves from an active federal crime scene. As of 7 o'clock this morning, I announced delivering the ultimate checkmate. A federal injunction was granted by a judge. Every single trust account, subsidiary, holding, and personal bank account connected to this family has been completely frozen. You have absolutely zero access to capital. Your credit cards will decline. Your assets are locked. I look directly at Richard, who is sweating profusely, leaning against the fireplace for physical support. Furthermore, I conclude, my voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings of their stolen mansion. The deed to this estate is officially contested. My corporate litigators have submitted the complete preliminary fraud dossier directly to the Financial Crimes Division of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The authorities have the forged wire transfers, the shell company registrations, and the fabricated medical petition. You have absolutely no money left to fight us, and the federal agents are already building your indictments. The absolute finality of my statement hangs in the cold air before the entire toxic facade violently shatters into a million jagged pieces. The wealthy guests do not wait for another invitation to leave. They recognize a sinking ship, and nobody wants to drown today. A mass exodus begins. People grab their expensive coats and rush for the heavy double doors, scrambling to distance themselves from a highly radioactive federal crime scene. Within 2 minutes, the grand foyer is completely empty of spectators, leaving only my family standing in the wreckage of their own making. Nia is the first to break. The carefully cultivated influencer persona evaporates, replaced by unadulterated terror. She looks at her phone, realizing the live stream has captured her inside a federally seized asset. She drops the device onto the marble floor. The glass screen shatters, a perfect physical metaphor for her manufactured life. "I am not going to federal prison for you people," Nia screams, her voice cracking with hysterical, uncontainable panic. She shoves Connor away when he tries to grab her arm. "Do not touch me. This was not my idea." She turns her manic gaze toward Richard and Patricia. She points a shaking finger directly at my parents. "It was them. They masterminded the whole thing from the very beginning. Richard told us exactly how to set up the shell company. Patricia told us how to forge the digital signatures. They said the old man was going to be locked away in a facility anyway, so no one would ever notice the missing capital. I just signed the paperwork because they promised me the house. I am a victim here." Connor's face turns purple with rage. Instead of defending his parents, he immediately throws them under the bus to save himself. "You told me the trust was ours by right, Dad," Connor yells, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "You said you had the legal maneuvering completely under control. You dragged my wife into this." "You greedy, incompetent fool!" Richard roars back, abandoning his patriarchal dignity. He lunges toward his son, his face twisted in fury. "You were supposed to mask the wire transfers through a secondary vendor. You left a digital trail leading straight to the closing table. You ruined my plan." Patricia bursts into frantic, genuine tears, sinking onto the bottom step of the grand staircase. Audrey stands frozen, clutching her mimosa glass, realizing that her endless supply of family funding has just been permanently eradicated. The unified front they presented just an hour ago has dissolved into a vicious pit of betrayals. They are tearing each other apart like cornered animals, eager to trade their own flesh and blood for a lighter prison sentence. Harrison watches the absolute implosion of his descendants with a cold, hardened expression. He taps his carved wooden cane against the marble floor once. The sharp sound cuts through their screaming. "You brought this upon yourselves." Harrison states, his voice carrying the final judgment of a king banishing traitors from his realm. He turns to me, offering his arm. "Take me home, Clara. The air in this house is toxic." I take my grandfather's arm. We walk out through the massive mahogany doors, leaving them trapped in their beautiful stolen cage, screaming at each other as the sirens of consequence begin to sound in the distance. Fast forward exactly 3 months. The wheels of federal justice grind slowly, but they grind exceedingly fine. Once Donovan Reed handed over our meticulously documented fraud dossier, the federal indictments followed with brutal efficiency. Richard and Connor were arrested on a Tuesday morning. They were formally charged with multiple counts of conspiracy, wire fraud, and identity theft. The federal prosecutors offered absolutely no leniency to them. Both men are currently out on heavily monitored bail, wearing ankle monitors while they await trial. Their legal defense bills have completely drained whatever legitimate savings they had left. Richard's reputation in the Chicago business community has been entirely annihilated. He is a pariah universally shunned by the people he once desperately tried to impress. Nia attempted a ruthless strategy of self-preservation. The very day the accounts were frozen, she filed for divorce, claiming she was an innocent victim manipulated by her husband. The federal prosecutors did not buy her performance. Because her name was on the articles of organization for the shell company, the asset forfeiture swept through her life like a hurricane. She lost the luxury vehicles, the designer wardrobes, the expensive jewelry, and every single cent she claimed as her influencer income. She went completely bankrupt and retreated to a tiny apartment facing her own impending legal battles. Audrey experienced the harshest reality check of her entire sheltered existence. With the trust accounts frozen and her parents completely destitute, her endless allowance evaporated instantly. She was evicted from her luxury downtown loft when the rent checks stopped clearing. For the first time in 30 years, Audrey was forced to acquire actual employment. She now works a grueling minimum wage retail job at a suburban shopping mall, spending her days folding sweaters and answering to strict managers. Patricia was left entirely alone. Without Richard's stolen wealth to fund her social climbing, her country club friends abandoned her completely. She moved into a small rented condominium, spending her days crying to divorce lawyers she can barely afford. Tonight, the harsh winter winds have yielded to a mild, beautiful spring evening in Chicago. The atmosphere inside my penthouse is a world away from the chaotic, manufactured cruelty of that Thanksgiving night. I am standing in my dining room, the very same room where I once sat alone in humiliation. The custom chandeliers emit a warm, golden glow. The mahogany table is set for two. There are no pretenses here. There is only genuine warmth, mutual respect, and absolute peace. Harrison sits at the head of the table. He looks remarkably healthy, his posture straight, his eyes bright, with sharp intellect. Since the indictments, we have worked together to restructure the management of his commercial real estate portfolio. I have expanded my redevelopment firm, integrating some of his most prized assets into my urban revitalization projects. We are building a legitimate, enduring legacy based on hard work, brilliant strategy, and unwavering loyalty. I walk over and pour him a glass of his favorite single malt scotch. I pour myself a glass of sparkling water. I sit in the chair beside him, looking out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the magnificent, glittering city skyline. We raise our glasses in a quiet, deeply meaningful toast. I realize now that the pain I felt when they abandoned me was simply the painful shedding of an illusion. I had spent my entire life trying to prove my worth to people who were fundamentally incapable of recognizing it. I had let biology dictate my boundaries. I will never make that mistake again. True family is not defined by shared DNA genetic obligations or obligatory holiday gatherings. True family is not about bloodlines that demand blind submission or empty loyalty. True family is about the people who stand with you when the battlefield is drawn. It is about the people who protect your mind, respect your boundaries, and match your loyalty with unshakable devotion. Family is the people who walk into the freezing snow to find you, the people who arm you for the fight, and the people who never, ever leave you sitting alone at an empty table. Society often dictates that blood is thicker than water, weaving a persistent narrative that family must be accommodated at all costs. However, the profound lesson embedded in these narratives is that shared DNA does not guarantee unconditional love, safety, or respect. When those closest to us consistently choose manipulation, blatant favoritism, and cruelty over genuine support, holding on to the illusion of a perfect family becomes actively destructive. We are conditioned from childhood to tolerate unacceptable behavior under the guise of familial loyalty. But the truth revealed here is stark true. Family is defined by consistent actions, not mere genetics. The turning point in any journey of healing arrives not through vindictive revenge, but through the quiet, radical courage of choosing oneself. Walking away from deeply ingrained toxic dynamics requires immense strength. It means grieving the family you deserved, but never had, and accepting the painful reality of who they truly are without making excuses for their shortcomings. Yet, in the vacuum, left by their physical or emotional absence, something beautiful emerges the space to cultivate a chosen family. This chosen network, built on mutual respect, unwavering support in times of crisis, and the genuine celebration of our triumphs, proves that our worth is never determined by those incapable of seeing it. Healing begins the moment we stop trying to earn love from empty wells and start investing in the people who show up when it matters most. Success is entirely hollow if it requires sacrificing your dignity to please people who fundamentally misunderstand you. True security lies in self-reliance and the unshakable knowledge of your own inherent value. Evaluate the relationships in your own life today and find the courage to walk away from tables where respect is no longer being served.